Welcome to the Dark Shadows Podcast with your co-hosts Vicky Ray, Tom Diamond, and Keith Chowgle, bringing you all the odd goings-on from Collinsport, Maine.
Hello, welcome to Literary License Podcast, and today we're discussing Dark Shadows, episodes 244 to 265. And today we have with us Vicky Ray. Hello, Vicky.
Hi, guys.
And Tom Diamond.
Hello, everybody. Hope you are all staying safe.
And before we get started, let's do our Roses and Thorns segment, and we'll start with Vicky. What's your Roses and Thorns for the week?
The only real thorn I have, other than the obvious I'm not going into anymore, but is I watched that stupid movie you suggested, the Banana Splits, and I've got that stupid song in my head. I was making breakfast this morning. I'm going, tra la 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 la, and I mean, I watched it twice because it was such a train wreck. I couldn't stop watching, and then I had to watch it again because I know I missed stuff, and I wouldn't say it was engaging, but I couldn't stop watching it. When you guys mentioned it, you and Joe last week, I had to see it because I'd never heard of it. And I figured when they made a movie, Banana Splits, I figured, it's going to be for the kiddies. And it's hysterical. If you guys see this, everybody has so much time, watch it. You won't be disappointed. It's funny. It really is.
And do you have a rose for the week?
Yeah, I got a small rose. I'm kind of excited. We got a couple of kids. Everybody's healthy. We're going to do social distancing, but they opened, just a few of us are going to the BMX track out in the open, in the fresh air and the heated sunlight of Texas. So some of these kids could do some laps because they're going crazy. They just are. But we're all healthy, so it'd be nice to see the kids at least say hi to each other from 6 feet away and get some laps in.
Yeah, the new normal.
I don't know how we're ever going to be normal again. So, I mean, it is the new normal. It is what it is.
Well, apparently Tinder and Grindr are really having troubles now, aren't they?
Oh my God. Who was it that, this is Dr. Faust. So it was Faust? Is that his name?
Yeah, Fostley or yeah.
That poor guy, I don't know if he meant this. I don't think he knew what Tinder was. But he said, well, it's okay. Get on Tinder, meet people. And I was laughing because it's like, I don't think he knows Tinder's a hookup site. The poor guy, he's probably just thinking, well, it's probably not. You just get on there and talk to people. I mean, chat roulette would probably be easier. But, but I totally love chat roulette. If I'm bored at 1 a.m, that is the place to be. It just is. But that poor guy, he had no idea that Tinder was a hookup site. I really don't.
Well, that's hopefully someone's educated him in the meantime. And so, Tom, what's your Roses and Thorn of the week?
Well, I have a nice rose to report. I still do my dabbling in voiceover work, but I just started my doctoral program in business, the DBA, the Doctor of Business Administration with the
Awesome, good deal.
Thank you. Human Resources concentration. I'm going to North Central University, and that's an online institution, and I really recommend it. I think it's really great for people who are committed for that. In my real life, which I rarely discuss, I was in human resources for 12 years on an organizational level, and so the bottom line is I just aced my first course.
Very good.
And thank you. And I'm getting involved. I've just been given a research mentorship. I've been offered a research mentorship with one of the organizational effectiveness people at the school. So we're starting to work on papers, and maybe I'll get published while I'm still a student. You never know. But and I want to teach with that. So that's a big rose, and that's been doing some involvement. I think the thorn is the coronavirus. I'm scared to go out of the house. I'll be very honest with you. And but I understand that where I am, I'm in Florida, and where I am, I understand there have been some peaks somewhere. It has been going down for the past few days. I don't know exactly what the story is, but that is something, a continuing thorn that I think we all have to live with. And that's my rose and that's my thorn.
Well, my rose of the week is I'm no longer in the COVID ward, so that's good. We're working on trialing a vaccine at the moment, which is...
Yeah, that's what I want to hear about.
Which is changing my life. I can't say too much about it, but we injected people today, so yeah, we'll wait and hopefully we'll see how things go in the next couple of weeks.
I hope they have a huge stipend.
Well, I mean, they're trialing 800 people here at the moment in different places across the UK. So, in the next 3 to 4 weeks, we should be able to correlate the data and figure out, if it's successful or not. I mean,
it has definitely been a journey for you, hasn't it?
It's been an eye opener. I never thought I would see in my life, but I got some new skills I never thought I would have. So
true.
Life, just when I thought my job was boring and I've seen everything, I'm now done. I've done stuff I normally would do in my job. So yeah, so it's been interesting. And my thorn, God, I really don't have a thorn. I guess it's just, I don't know. At the moment, now that the sun's out here and the weather's really nice here, we seem to be having a lot more people running around outside. So kind of like, but it is what it is. I'm not gonna lose sleep over it. Fine, if they get sick and they show up, and if they show up in front of me, I'll just go. I guess I'll have to treat them. I guess.
By the way,
it is what it is.
I don't think Keith would ever have said this himself, and he's going to kill me afterwards, but I want everybody to know that I'm not the only academic here. Keith is a well-renowned criminal psychologist, and that's his job. And then, of course, that's great because he knows how to handle me. And I want to say that Keith's academic credentials are very, very impressive. So it just goes to show you that, and Vicky comes from an archaeological background. So we are all, so us Dark Shadows people are pretty smart, I think.
We might not always agree on everything.
Well, that's part of life. That's right. That's very true, and that has certainly come out. No, and that's okay. I mean, that's part of life. If we all agreed on everything, it would be very vanilla. And I like chocolate.
I like vanilla, actually.
I like Neapolitan. I like all three.
Well, you're being political, Keith.
Get the hate emails rolling in because he likes Neapolitan ice cream.
That's right. But go ahead, Keith. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Well, I mean, before we go into Dark Shadows, we are joining forces with Story Geek. And what Story Geek is giving us is what you can download and what you can see from your home as you're self-isolated. So Story Geek, take it away.
What movies and TV shows should you be watching the week of April 20th? I'm Jay Shear, co-host of the Story Geeks podcast, and here are the movies and TV shows you can watch from home. Just released and available for rent or buy this week, Bad Boys for Life. Literally, the description on Metacritic for this movie is, the bad boys, Mike Lowry, which is Will Smith, and Marcus Burnett, Martin Lawrence, are back together for one last ride. That's it. It's just that one sentence. Bad Boys for Life is rated R and has a 59 on Metacritic. The Gentleman, a present-day UK-based gangster movie starring Matthew McConaughey, Hugh Grant, and a number of other recognizable names. It's essentially a Guy Ritchie gangster movie, which is almost its own genre. The Gentleman has a Metacritic score of 51 and is rated R. And finally, Like a Boss was also released this week. It's a comedy starring Tiffany Haddish and Rose Byrne and is about a startup cosmetics company that gets bought out by a larger firm. Like a Boss has a 33 on Metacritic and is also rated R. 3 for 3 on R-rated movies this week, as it turns out. New to streaming, you can watch the reality TV show called Brain Games. It's a fun show that illustrates how the human brain works. I really enjoy that show, and it's now available on Disney+. A bunch of James Bond films are now available on Amazon Prime, so if you're a James Bond fan, definitely check that out. Some of the new movies and TV shows on Netflix that I haven't mentioned yet this month are The Social Network, the movie about Facebook, and all of the Lethal Weapon films. And finally, new to Hulu, you can now check out Parasite, Zombieland, and Kill Bill Volumes 1 and 2, amongst many other movies and TV shows I'll let you know about in the weeks to come. As for my picks, we just released an episode of the Story Geeks podcast about the hidden gems on all the various streaming channels. I'll give you my 10 through 6, and you can listen to the podcast to hear my top 5 and all of the other shows and movies referenced by my co-hosts. At number 10, I have The Boys on Amazon Prime. It's about superheroes who are managed by a corporation looking to capitalize on cultural safety. Very entertaining, but also very adult. At number 9, American Gods on Starz. Based on Neil Gaiman's popular novel, this series posits the question, what if the things we worship turned into actual gods? It's fascinating and also very adult. Number 8, The Umbrella Academy on Netflix. A ragtag group of X-Men-like heroes has to learn to work together to save the world. A bit more family-friendly and a lot of fun. Number 7, Book of Eli. Denzel Washington is a blind man in an apocalyptic world trying to defend a relic that everyone else wants. That's on Netflix. And at number 6, Black Sails, the series on Starz. It's a prequel to the novel Treasure Island, except it's far more like Game of Thrones and not intended for younger audiences. It's still a lot of fun, though. For some more family-friendly choices, listen to the latest of the Story Geeks podcast. You can find the Story Geeks podcast on your preferred podcast provider. Last week, I mentioned that my top-selling novel, Timeslingers, is available on Kindle for only 99 cents. Well, because of this quarantine, we wanted to benefit you with an extra story. We just released our supernatural steampunk western novel, Death of a Bounty Hunter. If you're into Jonah Hex or the Dark Tower series, this might be for you. For more information, visit www.deathofabountyhunter.com. And if you visit deathofabountyhunter.com on Friday, you can get this book for free. It's our way of thanking you for staying home. Until next week, this has been Jay Shear from the Story Geeks podcast, and I hope you have fun streaming movies and TV shows from home.
Hello, welcome back to Literary License Podcast, and thank you, Story Geek. And remember, Story Geek, the guy who's actually doing the stuff for us about what you can download, has a free book that's available on Fridays, and it's available for 99 cents on Amazon. And those details, of course, were in there, and we will put those in our show notes. So now, as we talking about Dark Shadows, episodes 244 to 265, we're going to start out with Out of the Shadows with Tom Diamond. He discusses trivia and bloopers. So, Tom, take it away.
Well, thank you very much, sir. And the first thing, before I get into that, I'd like to put a shout-out, as it were, to our subscribers and to our fans. We have gotten some guest stars, and we are continuing to get hopefully
Don't give it away.
Stars. What's that?
Don't give it away.
No, I'm not giving it away. I'm not going to tell you who. I'm not going to tell you. Although, if you look on the internet, we've got some stuff coming on. I'll leave that up to Keith, but we would like to request that if anybody would like to hear any particular stars or anybody that's still with us that has not been done or that has not been aired yet. Of course, we have already spoken to Catherine Leigh Scott, Roger Davis, and others.
Try another.
Others.
Good save, Tom.
And others. I'm not gonna. Yeah. Well, I know where my bread is buttered on. Anyway, so but if anybody is interested, please don't hesitate to email us at info@llpodcast.com. That's info, I-N-F-O, at llpodcast.com. And let us know who you'd like to have on, and we'll try and get them for you. Now, we can't guarantee anything. There are people we have approached that sadly have said that they would rather not. But then again, there are other people who have. And we have a nice surprise coming up regarding that. And I will not say anything because Vicky's sitting on me right now, virtually.
I'm eyeballing him.
She's virtually giving me a Jonathan Fritz stare.
Giving him the Italian eye.
Is that what it is? Malocchio.
That's right.
The bad eye. But please, please feel free. Okay, so getting out.
Wait, one more thing, Tom, before I forget.
Sure.
I had some emails from people in East Texas that started listening to us, and I just thought I'd tell. Shout out to East Texas. Thank you for listening to us, and we appreciate you along for the ride.
Well, that's great, and I'm sure you'll echo that. Okay, now getting to the the actors who you'll see in this block. You'll see a number of new ones, and the first one I want to say, first and foremost, because she starts in the last episode, is Grayson Hall as Dr. Julia Hoffman. And she starts in the last episode of this block, and for the newbies, she will have a profound influence on the rest of Dark Shadows.
I want to say one thing about Grayson Hall that I just totally found badass. I don't know. I'm pretty sure it's in the segment we're covering. I just love how she just lights her cigarette off of Barnabas Collins' candelabra like a boss. she just lights her cigarette up.
Actually, I'm afraid it isn't in this block, but
I don't care.
It's going to be later.
Because she's in the last episode of this block.
She's in the last episode, and this is really
she's great, though.
Yeah,
Grayson Hall's excellent addition.
Yeah, so she's in Wyncliffe. Very, very briefly, she was born, Shirley Grossman was her real name, in 1926 in Philadelphia.
No kidding.
Yep, nice Jewish girl. And her father Albert was from Latvia, so she's a first-generation American. Her mother, Eleanor, was from South Africa. And Eleanor was actually an actress in the Yiddish theater. Which I think is very interesting. And so Grayson Hall, as Shirley Grossman, got her professional debut in 1942 at the age of 20 in the stock company. So she's born in 1922, I'm sorry.
Wow.
And her first marriage to Ted Brooks in 1946 ended in divorce, and she then married Sam Hall, one of the big writers of Dark Shadows, in 1952. She has also now, and Grayson Hall's biggest claim to fame was her Academy Award nomination for Night of the Iguana.
Kidding, that's right.
That's right, playing opposite Richard Burton. And so she I think is the only Dark Shadows alumna to have that particular distinction.
I'm gonna have to backtrack that movie and check it out because I
that's
liked it.
That is one of the best Tennessee Williams adaptations of a film. Excellent. Deborah Carr, excellent.
Absolutely.
Oh wow! So it's pretty star-studded cast.
Oh yeah, absolutely. No, she really.
Did it say in your research how she came upon the name Grayson? I love that name. As a matter
of, actually, I did not see that, but I will look that up.
Just wondering.
Yeah, no, I will look that up. I don't think I wrote it down. I think I ran over it, but
just an interesting choice.
Yeah, I have so much information here, but
I know you're always a fountain of information.
Well, I try.
Why I ask you?
I don't want to bore people, but anyway, so she was in That Darn Cat in 1965. She was also in. She had a recurring role in The Man from U.N.C.L.E. and The Girl from U.N.C.L.E. Before Dark Shadows. And of course, after Dark Shadows and soaps, she was on All My Children as reporter Margie Gray, and One Life to Live as Euphemia Ralston. And she was in a Night Gallery episode, which actually wasn't mentioned in the bio, but I remember her doing. So Grayson passed away in 1985, I believe, or the mid-'80s from cancer. but she is revered and remembered by the Dark Shadows fandom, and she was really the triumvirate. I call it the triumvirate: Barnabas, her, and Willie. And we're going to get into that in a lot more detail as episodes go on. And while we're at it from that last episode, let me mention the appearance of Alice Drummond, who played Nurse Jackson in the last episode. Alice Drummond turns out to have an interesting career herself. She played the librarian in the first Ghostbusters, if you remember that. She was in Ace Ventura: Pet Detective as Ray's mother, and she was in, I don't know if this is forgettable or unforgettable, To Wong Fu, Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar in 95. But what I remember her both, if you guys remember the picture Awakenings with Robert Williams, where with Robin Williams and I think it was De Niro, where they gave these psychiatric patients an experimental drug, which got them out of their catatonia. And Alice Drummond played the first patient that he literally, she was in a wheelchair. I'll never forget, she was in a wheelchair and she just stared into space. She was completely catatonic. And because of the drug, she came out of it and started remembering everything about her. They all thought this movie was done in the 60s. It was, the time setting for the movie was in the 1960s, but they all thought they were living in 1927. Because that was the last time they remembered everything. And I'll never forget her. She was really, really good with that. She was in Funny Farm. She was in Anybody's Fool, Afterlife. She was born in 1928. Maybe she's still around. I'm gonna try and see if I can find her. Moving on, Sharon Smythe. Or Sharon Smith, I should say. I believe she pronounces it Sharon Smith, comes on as Sarah Collins, the young sister of Barnabas, starting in episode 255. Sharon is one of the, in my personal opinion, one of the most warm, nicest people in Dark Shadows fandom, who literally, she will always talk to you like you're a friend of hers, like a person.
Very nice person. Extremely
nice person. She has gone to the conventions. She is, she's a wife and a mother. She was in the insurance industry for a while. She did get out of acting. But she does still make personal appearances when, of course, everything's on hold now, due to the coronavirus. But she has gone to the conventions, makes personal appearances, and she's great. We're going to be talking about her a lot. The new writer on this block is Joe Caldwell, who joins Ron Sproat and Malcolm Marmestein, who's now starting to kind of like get out of the picture a little bit. Joe Caldwell and I believe and Ron Sproat were friends, and so he got the job based on that. And so he's responsible for some of the new writing in terms of this block. Hugh Franklin makes his last appearance as the lawyer, Richard Garner, in episode 246. And Mitch Ryan will no longer be around for this.
No, bummer. But I like the new one too, though.
Well, yeah, and as Anthony George. But the story with Mitch Ryan, who admittedly had an alcoholism, which,
right.
But he has since gone on to do very, very good things.
Yes, he did.
I can't begin to talk about all the TV shows he's been on, all the Broadway plays,
movies
he's been on. St. Elsewhere comes to mind. NYPD Blue. Star Trek: The Next Generation. Yep. Star Trek: The Next Generation. Riker's father. And he came on for a few appearances in that. Unfortunately, what happened in episode 252, there's a little bit of controversy. He either did not show up for work that day because of the alcoholism, or he did show up and he was too inebriated to go on the air. I don't know which one is true. So they wound up using Joe Crothers. Joe Crothers had a lot to do that day. He had to memorize, Joe Hasley had to memorize those lines and do a scene with Vicky. And we'll get into that in the bloopers, but he actually, the lines were still Burke's lines. And,
Right.
And I can tell you right now, he talks about Jason McGuire. He mentions McGuire as if he knows him. I mean, he actually had never met McGuire, as Joel has.
What episode is that for our listeners?
That's 252. 252.
52.
Yep. That's okay. So look for that. That was when Joel Crothers took over the script. Dana Elcar returns as Sheriff Patterson for a couple of episodes in episodes 247 and 258. And don't you like him with the mustache in 258? All of a sudden, he's got a mustache. My God, he's sporting that. I don't know what gave them the idea to do that. The Blue Whale extras. Bob O'Connell, the lovely, the famous bartender. Now we've got a last name for him, Bob Rooney. And he appears in episodes 248, 252, and 257. Another extra that you will see in 248 is a guy by the name of Bill Gregory, who appeared on Edge of Night, Another World Somerset. In 2006, he had a role in L.A. Forensics, The Find, Ruby Ridge. My favorite Blue Whale extra is a gal by the name of Audrey Campbell. And I think, and that's in episode, where are you, Audrey? 252. You're going to like this background, Keith. Audrey Campbell was a soft porn star of the 1960s.
Yay!
Such memorable hits as One Naked Night. Let's see.
Is that the porn?
What?
Is that her porno?
Yeah. 50,000 BC, before clothes. Sin in the Suburbs. There's a memorable one. And her biggest claim to fame in cult stardom. Joe Sarno was a cult director at that point, and she played Madame Olga in the trilogy White Shades of China. I'm now my handwriting. Excuse me, fans. I'm going to be corrected for this, but I can't read it. White Shades of Chinatown, Olga's Girls, and Olga's House of Shame. So she has she was also in Ryan's Hope, Guiding Light, and As the World Turns. So she had a very prestigious career, you might say.
Well, it sounds like she went legit after a while. So
Yeah.
Well, and it just goes to show you that you're in the Blue Whale. That'll give you your start. That's for sure.
It worked for Harvey Keitel.
Yes, if it worked for him, it could work for her. Yep. Tom Gorman, another regular, is on episode 248. And George McCoy, so those are regulars in episode 257. Michael Hadge. Is noted for, he was only on for 4 episodes that I can count, although it may have been a few more, but I only counted in 4 here. And he played Buzz, Carolyn's beatnik boyfriend. And
Was that a wig?
I want to know that. It sure looked like a wig to me. Well, now I don't want to.
I think he was wearing Elizabeth Stotter's hairpiece.
Would you stop?
I'm going to go into this later, but they really, the way they wrote him in, this was not a 1960s character. This was more of a beatnik character. But that was the writers. The writers were not. That was done. I might as well say it now. That was done literally the Summer of Love started.
Yes.
And so he comes on there saying bread and man and tapping on the doing the drums on the table, So he's like, the writers obviously did not know what the hippie movement was about. So,
yeah, and I don't think they knew what the motorcycle culture was about either. Because let's face it, I've seen more realistic bikers in Annette Funicello in a Frankie Avalon movie than I saw with Buzz.
Although, didn't they have Hell's Angels at that point? Weren't they?
They did.
I'm quite surprised because if you think a few years prior to this, Marlon Brando did that fantastic motorcycle gang movie, didn't he?
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So I'm surprised that this is. I mean, we'll get more into that, but yeah, it's a curiosity piece. Let's just put it that way.
I would think.
Well, I mean, I guess it doesn't translate well into our decade, maybe so much.
I don't think it. To be honest, I don't think it translated well in that decade when it originally showed. So there's nothing against the actor. Just the way
No,
he
not at
dressed and
all.
everything.
No, he's doing what he was given. He was doing what he was given to do.
Precisely.
It's as simple as that. But he was damn good at it.
Yeah.
And
He's memorable. Everyone remembers Buzz. I mean, I think it's for someone who was only in it for a few episodes, every person remembers Buzz. So
He's the perfect revenge on anybody's parents, for sure.
And stay tuned for his. Well, I will say this: he is 87. He is still alive, and he's writing plays. And we will
kicking it.
And we'll get into. Stay tuned for a surprise, fans, regarding that. Anyway, Anthony George replaces Burke in episode 262, and he is on for one episode during this block. You are going to see him a lot more as Burke, and you will also see him play another character in another time period, which we will not talk about now, but which we will get into. And finally, also for the first time, Rams Mastoller, who is the costume designer, I believe this is the first time she's actually mentioned in the credits in episode 245. That was when they hired her, to start doing some of the special work, as Orbox wasn't helping them out enough. And finally, in episode 261, Nurse Packard is played by Janny Darngelo, Darngelo, and we have no idea what she's been doing before or since.
Right.
So that takes care of the stars. Now getting into the bloopers. Well, once again, we have a lot of bloopers. I'm going to try to go over these as fast as I can. In episode 244, Liz stumbles over her words. In episode 244, there's a boom shadow on the door of the den in the upper left-hand corner. Is Carolyn?
Did you say they had a nickname for the boom guy?
He
always cast a shadow with a boom. Something about that.
The boom guy, the mic guy, the boom guy. Well, this is much, much later on. But there was actually the name of the boom guy was a guy by the name of, I don't know if he was there at that point, but the name of the boom guy was Kurt Jurgenhans. There's a trivial piece of thing for you, which you could take on the subway. And there is a character much later on, which is beyond our scope at this point, by the name of Mr. Juggins. They named that character after Kurt Jurgenhans. We will talk about that much, much later. But since you asked, Vicky, you get what you wish for.
I know. You're so quick on your toes today, too.
Well, since I'm sitting down, that's kind of hard to believe.
You're quick on your ass, then.
But that's right. All right. I like that better. Okay. In episode 240, we have a lot of mic booms. So we have the mic boom sliding over the staircase of the old house in episode 255. A mic boom. Also a mic boom in that same episode, Shadow on the Old House column. And in 246, I'll tell you, these mic booms. He must have been ill during this block. The mic boom was on Roger's jacket in episode 246. On passing. Okay, let me go to a major blooper in episode 247, and I caught this. I don't think I've seen this anywhere else. Do you remember when Sam is taking the painting out of the old house with Willie? Sam wants to bring the painting to his house to finish it up. He needs something to do after after Maggie's disappearance, and so he's taking it to the car, and he walks out with it, and Willie follows him. Now, Willie opens the door to the old house and following him at this point. And what do we see? If you look closely enough, you have to have a big screen for it. The painting is on the floor up against the papier-mâché tree. David Ford obviously took that out of the old house and then had to run to his next scene. So he placed the painting on the floor by the tree.
Right.
If you open when Willie opens the door, when John Carlin opens the door, you see the painting. It's very clear. The painting is sitting against the papier-mâché tree. So that's where he left it, which is fun. In episode 247, Sam, and you'll notice this, Sam will put his pipe in his mouth, but he never smokes it. And so that's another thing. That is from Amazon Prime. When Maggie was put into the coffin in episode 248, remember, they were running from one scene to the other, so it was live to tape. So they actually for some reason, they used the stand-in when the stand-in for Jonathan, when Maggie was in the coffin. You will not see that in the show. You will not see that. Where you will see it is in the red set Dark Shadows card collection. Dark Shadows had a card collection which came out during that point, both red cards and green cards. And you actually see a picture of the stand-in and Maggie's looking up at him. But the blooper that you will see is that when Barnabas is closing the coffin, he doesn't have his ring on. I didn't notice that. Yeah, absolutely. Take a look at that. Episode 248 is where that happens. 249, Roger's blooper. One of the worst moments of my life. He says most and then worst. In episode 250, when Maggie leans against the brick wall, it moves and wiggles very slightly. In episode, let's see. Okay. Episode 251. Okay, now this is not a blooper so much as it's a piece of curiosa. In this episode, the announcer gives you a recap of what's been happening the prior week. That's really the first time that's ever been done. I noticed that. Yeah.
That was when they stopped doing it.
The reason for that was very interesting. At first I thought it was because everybody was having problems catching up to it. And that does happen later on. But no, the reason for this, and I will give DarkShadowsEveryday.com credit for it, is that it was preempted. The show was preempted in some areas for the prior week because ABC was screening the UN hearings on the Vietnam War.
Oh, gosh. Okay.
How do you like that? So because of that, it was preempted in certain parts of the country, and that was getting the fans annoyed. And so it was for that reason that they gave that special recap.
I feel their pain.
It's quite funny because they could have done that recap during the Gulf War because that is the Gulf War that ruined the reboot of Dark Shadows.
No kidding. Yes. God.
Isn't that? Think? Yeah. Well, they were smarter at ABC. I had to tell you, at least that.
I really would have liked to seen how that was going to play out too. I'm still bummed about that.
We are all bummed about that. That was that's another topic, but that was when it started. 1 out of 4 households were watching the first 2 episodes.
Yeah,
it really could have taken off had it not been for the Gulf War. But anyway, I don't want to start getting upset. In episode 251, Barnabas locks Maggie in the room, but you can actually see that Catherine Leigh Scott is actually helping him push the door closed. So yeah. I know that was kind of cute. A very famous blooper in episode 252, when Carolyn, and I got to tell you, Nancy Barrett had that great scene about being Mrs. McGuire. She's screaming at Liz, "I'm Mrs. McGuire," and and then she gives Buzz a passionate kiss.
Yes.
And everybody's looking at Nancy Barrett was apparently a good kisser on that show. Boy, what a smooch! So while she's doing that. What is happening to Joan Bennett? Well, Joan Bennett runs away. She runs up the stairs. But what you don't see, because you're too busy looking at the two of them smooching, is Joan Bennett couldn't open the door. So she's struggling with the doorknob as the scene fades.
They had lots of problems with doors and whatnot.
Yes, they did. Poor Joe Bennett. Not one of her. Considering she was such a movie star, not one of her finer moments.
No.
Okay. Episode 254, for those people who like to see tracking marks on the floor, which are the marks that the actors have to go to during rehearsal to stand. And they didn't always get rid of the tracking marks in the drawing room. And you will see little tracking marks in the drawing room in the first scene as Carolyn and Carolyn as Elizabeth start to speak. And I don't know why. They must have been experimenting with color at this point, because if you look at the credits in 254 are in purple. Mm-hmm. And I thought, wow, that was weird, because everything else is black and white. So I don't know. Maybe they were experimenting at the time. Okay, to episode 255, another Mike Boone shadow on the tapestry above Josette's bed. Also in 255, the famous blooper of Sam saying, I finished the painting of Barnabas Collins. So that was a famous one. You will have music cues in episode 255. That was a bad episode for bloopers, or a good episode. You have music cues starting before the scene ends. Also in 255, which I thought was hilarious, where Willie had to gag Maggie and had her at the top of the stairs, if you remember, while Joe and Sam were talking downstairs. And the way the gag was positioned, it wasn't covering Maggie's mouth. So she was opening her mouth up and down. Yeah. She could have very easily screamed. She could have
we're not supposed to think about those things.
Oh, God forbid. So she's looking like a guppy, where her poor Catherine Lee Scott did such a great job, by the way. I don't want to take that away from her. I don't want to take that away from her. I don't want to give it away, but I loved her performance during this block.
Yeah.
But at that point, the poor thing is opening her mouth, opening and closing her mouth, and you know, she looked like a fish.
But didn't they tighten it up the next?
Yes.
Commercial.
Yes, they did. They did tighten it up after the next commercial. Absolutely. Okay. In episode 255, once again, the cell door moves slightly when Maggie pulls it shut. Because remember, these are all balsam sets. Now, here's something. The last scene of 255 is where Sarah Collins first appears. And in that last scene, she's holding her doll. Then in the first scene of 256, there's no doll anymore. She's throwing her ball up and down. And that was a recap of the last scene. Right. So just think of that. You know, that's a continuity glitch. In episode 256, a teleprompter is seen in the tracking shot of the old house in the upper left-hand corner. This time it's from the outside of the old house. And a blooper that I will once again give credit to darkshadowseveryday.com that I would never have caught. Maggie is in Maggie's cell. There is a box that she is sitting next to. And Keith, I sent you guys this. I don't know if you got a chance to look at it. You can see in the box that she's sitting next to, there is a graffiti. Somebody wrote an eye. Somebody drew a picture of an eye with circles around the box. And that's a real that is really something. Okay, episode 259. Nancy Barrett apparently had been in a car accident herself, and for the past couple of episodes, she had sprained her wrist. And for the past couple of episodes, but they covered it. They had covered this. They covered her hand. This time, they wrote it into the plot by saying that she had an accident.
That's right. And when she was in jail.
Correct, and that's what she wound up in jail from. And you can see she's wearing an ace bandage over what looks like a splint, and that was she actually had that episode. Okay. Also, now going to episode 260, when Maggie escapes the jail cell by finding a secret passage, and Jonathan starts to look for her, and he goes into the passage. You can see the door, the door is open to the cell, and you see somebody walking. You can see a pair of legs walking across the door. It is theorized that may, I can't tell for sure, but somebody brought up the fact that it might have been, through the literature, it might have been Catherine Leigh Scott herself who was walking to the next scene. But I would have
Or it
to
could have been Mary Tyler Moore. Isn't that what she was famous for before she did Dick Van Dyke Show? Was her legs?
You're gonna make it after all.
Yeah.
Sarah plays the recorder, by the way, which I thought was interesting. Now, I'm not sure whether that London Bridge score was a flute or a recorder. I thought maybe the recorder was maybe an anachronism, but I looked it up. Sure enough, no, the recorder was developed in the 1500s. So
No kidding. I didn't know that. My kids, it's what the first thing they've ever played.
I played it in the third grade,
Yeah.
and Sharon Smith was 10 or 11 years old when she did that part. So it's very possible. But anyway, and then there's a voice gaffe from Sharon in episode 2. Don't play with other little girls. Well, I'm not gonna have the dirty mind and talking, in terms of going, I don't play with little girls or that kind of thing. But since all our minds are in the gutter, I thought I would mention that. Keith is smiling.
I know. I wasn't going to say anything because the listeners can't see us.
But we can see him. But we
Before
can see
they
him.
take him to Banger.
I don't play with little girls in Banger. Well, I will let the audience know, by the way, from now on, when Keith is smiling as we talk about this. But anyway, okay. Julia Hoffman is actually mentioned for the first time in episode 261.
Right.
The trivia fans, before she actually comes on a couple episodes.
You're kind of excited to know that she's coming because for people who are ahead or watched it all, all the good shit's going to start flying soon with the arrival of Julia.
Yeah. In fact, it is actually theorized by some that in this last couple of episodes, this is where you really start to see, and I have to thank the fans for their contributions, both on darkshadowseveryday.com and as well as on the internet, as well as on the different Dark Shadows forums on Facebook, for saying that, and it makes sense, these episodes 262 to 264, I'm getting ahead of myself, that's where you really start to see a change, a gradual change in the Barnabas character from the evil bastard that he was.
I'm not seeing
Maggie.
it bad, and I still think he was a
You start
butt.
to see it very slow. We'll get into that in the next section.
I know.
Because
Don't get me going. I always get ahead of myself anyway.
I know. I'm ahead
I get all
of myself.
excited. I'm sorry.
I'm ahead of myself also right now, and I shouldn't have opened my mouth, but all right. 262, shadow of the mic on the boom in the hall over the old house. 263, you will hear no less than 2 doors closing off stage in episode 263. One where Joe and Sam are talking about letting Vicky know about Maggie, that she wasn't dead, and the other, you'll hear a door close off stage when Carolyn and Vicky are talking in the drawing room. In 264, there's a gaffe from Jason where he says, never mind what I mean before Roger finishes speaking. And then Jason repeats it afterwards. In episode 264, this is very subtle. You have to look at, in the old house, you have to look at the shadow of John Carlin. In the first scene, he's waiting for his cue. You can only tell by the shadow on the wall that he starts to walk, he stops, he hesitates, and then he continues walking. You wouldn't have known that, obviously, if you hadn't looked at the shadow. And for some strange reason, I always look for these things when I look for the bloopers. Frid speak. Frid speak is what is the popular term now used when Jonathan flubs his lines. And
there goes Keith. I knew it. I was waiting for him to start giggling.
Thank you, Vicky. I was looking at my notes. I didn't see him. Thank you. Vicky's my plan B. But Vicky's my plan B in case I don't see him smile. Vicky's watching now. Okay, great.
I am.
Yeah.
He's a crafty one. You got to watch Keith.
We know this for a long time. Okay, and Jonathan, I want you to go out there, outside. There's an example. There's an example of that. Let's see. Another thing I did want to mention. Okay, so this is episode 264 when Joe and Sam are driving to Wincliffe to see her. Or it might be 265, excuse me, to see her. And they're driving in the car, and you can actually see the branches. They had this wheel.
I had to say that was fantastic.
They had this wheel set up where, and you see one branch turning to the right and another branch turning to the left. And then they do that. That
like
was
Palm Sunday all over again. The back window. Hosanna, hey, Hosanna.
They were moving circularly to simulate the passing scenery, and
it's quite distracting, actually, because I found myself actually watching the branches.
Well, we never knew. Why didn't they simply take Dr. Woodard in the car with them? Why did Dr. Woodard have to drive up separately? It's just these two. All of a sudden, what's the matter? They didn't like the guy. They said, "Oh, you go on. You go by yourself." And,
isn't it like 100 miles from Collinwood?
Yep.
I just like it because people just I don't know if they just kind of walk and just end up 3 hours later from 100 miles from wherever they are.
I know. I know. It's.
Yeah. We'll get into that because we do get a bit of like, where exactly is the mausoleum in the old house and Sam's cottage?
We also don't know why. Going back to episode 252 and 53, Maggie was wearing a wedding gown when she was imprisoned in the cellar, and then the next episode, she's wearing the dark robe. So how did that happen? Did Willie watch it change? That kind of thing. Okay. So I am looking. I think that there's probably more, and if I see it, I will get back to it.
There's always. I've always noticed something. You just never know. Live TV, man, it must have been a real bitch. It really must have been.
I have some. Boy, when Jason opens the door to and we haven't talked about that other plot, but when Jason opens the door in episode 249 to the basement room to inspect it, and he turns on the light, I think that's a great light bulb that was able to last for 18 years.
Oh, no kidding.
I would like to buy stock in that company. I'll tell you right now. That goes to show you that
you're not supposed to think about these things.
That's right, but that's what is so.
Considering in the 2 blocks ago that the lights couldn't even come on down there. They had to use a flashlight.
There you go. Well, there you go. Thank you, Keith. Now all of a sudden there's a light bulb. Who the hell put the light bulb in? Which is also what you will see in this block, and it's in one of the episodes. For the first time, you see these steps in the mausoleum, whereas before, when you first saw the mausoleum, Willie jumped down from into the secret room of the mausoleum. Now you see steps for the first time leading into the mausoleum, because it was very obvious that it would have been very hard for Jonathan to carry Catherine Leigh Scott into the mausoleum and just jump into there. So they had to put steps in there, and those steps appeared magically. And finally, Roger blooper in 249, one of the worst, most embarrassing moments of my life. Well, some of these bloopers turns out to be the most embarrassing moment of some of the actors' lives, but God, we love them because they are what make the show memorable over 50 years later to this day. So, though, that's the world of the bloopers in this block.
And now we're going to our Into the Shadows. So to give us news on Collinsport Maid. So Vicky, take it away.
Okay, and this is Vicky Ray with all the news from Collinsport, Maine. Dr. Woodward tells the world that he has found some inconsistencies in Maggie's blood, which are then stolen. He shows up at the old house asking for Willie to give another sample, which Willie is not pleased about at all. Barnabas agrees that Willie should give a sample, and we know that he's going to do it because Barnabas is very persuasive. Dr. Woodward will return with his trusty bag to take Willie's blood, and everybody's just waiting for that anxiously. Meanwhile, back at Collinwood, Jason informs Elizabeth that they will marry if she wants to protect Carolyn about the truth about what actually happened to Paul Stoddard. It also appears that Elizabeth has hidden away in the house due to the fact that she killed Paul Stoddard and buried him in the basement. That is a big secret. Why she didn't bury him on the grounds is anyone's guess. Personally, I'm surprised that Dan Curtis didn't try to rip off Edgar Allan Poe's Telltale Heart for this segment. Dr. Woodward shows up and takes Willie's blood, but Barnabas switches the sample, that crafty dog. Apparently, Barnabas has blood slides to spare, and Carolyn believes that the locked basement has clues in it, while Jason won't leave Collinwood and release his hold over Elizabeth. After much toing and froing, they finally get a look into the locked basement, which is probably one of the most anticlimactic lead-ups that we've experienced thus far. Elizabeth then announces her nuptial plans with Jason to the family. To put it lightly, they are shocked and dismayed. Sam visits the old house and speaks to Barnabas. Willie remains pensive and no one seems to notice. Later, Maggie appears at the cottage, peering in through the window, then runs off to the cemetery. It seems that the cemetery is the halfway point between the cottage and the old house. I was under the impression it might be 5 miles away, but who the hell knows? Barnabas finds Maggie there and drags her to the mausoleum to lock her in his old coffin. Maggie pretends to believe that she is Josette without the French accent and uses this device to stake Barnabas in his coffin. After discussing with Willie and waiting until the sun sets, this is foiled, landing her in a heap of trouble. Barnabas then locks her into the old house basement cell. Who has a cell in their basement, and what exactly is the reason any home would have their own cell? She will remain in this cell until she can turn into Josette. I have also to add that maybe Josette committed suicide because Barnabas seems to be the worst kind of boyfriend to have. He is one of those stalker boyfriends from a Lifetime film. Also, may I add, how many people get locked into cells until they turned into somebody else, and does this really work? Back at Collinwood, Carolyn and Elizabeth fight over Elizabeth's wedding plan. Carolyn goes off and finds the worst biking member who believes that fake leather and fairy boots makes him a Hell's Angel. We are now introduced to Buzz, though this might have to do with the Mrs. Kravitz wig that he is wearing, or maybe his name is sarcastic. Maggie comes up with a plan to give her ring to Willie in the hope he may pawn it or sell it, and people will realize that she is still alive and being held captive. This really doesn't go anywhere at the moment, but who knows, maybe this thread will get tied up in later episodes. Carolyn announces that she has plans with having a double wedding with Elizabeth, and she will marry the inept Buzz, who seems that his toughness comes as him not being born with social graces and his inability to sound coherent. Sam shows up at the old house and tells Barnabas that he thinks Maggie is dead. Barnabas shows empathy with a sly smile, and Maggie then hears a little girl singing London Bridge outside of her cell. She doesn't seem to question the outfit that this ghost has or the fact that she's running around in her nightgown. We do know that London Bridge will become a hated tune throughout this whole storyline. The girl is Sarah Collins, and she speaks in code. Considering that Maggie can't figure out the dress sense of the girl, it doesn't come to much of a surprise that she can't figure out what she is being told by Sarah. Sarah then runs into David, who thinks she is odd, and David thinks that she's just a special needs child who has wandered onto the property. Jason decides to intervene on Carolyn's plans to marry Buzz by using reverse psychiatry, which falls like a heavy stone over the cliffs of Widow's Hill. Jason then tries to bribe Buzz, but apparently Buzz seems to maybe come from money, and the idea of having a new motorbike seems not to have the allure that Jason thought it might have. Sarah appears once again, and Maggie has a limited conversation, which she then disappears. As she appears in and out of the cell, Maggie still hasn't picked up the sense that maybe Sarah isn't human. She tells Willie, but Willie thinks she's off her rocker and leaves, and then she finds Sarah's doll. Elizabeth is crying in her room, and Victoria comes in to comfort her. She tells Victoria the story 18 years ago on what happened to Paul Stoddard. Back at the old house, Sarah tells Maggie a riddle which leads her to a secret underground passage. Maggie then escapes her cell and makes a run for it, with Barnabas in hot pursuit. Sam finds Maggie on the beach. He and Dr. Woodward decide to send Maggie in, put her into a sanitarium, and pretend that she is dead. Victoria and Carolyn mourn the death of Maggie, but between the morning, Victoria does agree to bear witness at Elizabeth's wedding. Carolyn is still angrily determined to hurt her mother. Sam and Joe are still admitting that Maggie is dead, but considering this is the plan, not sure they find it difficult. Maybe because Joe has never been one to keep his mouth shut and Sam is an alcoholic, but at this point, who knows? Jason becomes more of a nuisance as he tries to bully Willie. Barnabas warns Willie that Jason may have to be dealt with. And Willie does tell Barnabas that he has seen Sarah, who claims that she lives in the old house properties. Barnabas' interest is piqued as he may get reacquainted with his dead little sister. At Wincliffe Sanatorium, Dr. Julia Hoffman is now introduced and reluctantly allows Sam and Joe to visit Maggie, who is now in a childlike state. We are not sure if it is because her mind has fractured from her experience with Barnabas, or is it because she is on some good drugs, which we all wish that we were given, because we now know we are going to have to finish up this marriage storyline next month, and we are going to need as much sedation as possible to get through this. That is the month that was in Collinwood, Maine, from myself, Vicki Ray. See y'all next month, and what lies beneath the storylines.
So, thank you, Vicki, for Into the Shadows segment. And now we're at our Shedding Some Light. And Tom, let's start discussing these episodes. So what are your thoughts of episodes 244 to 265?
Well, it's very interesting because I have a parallel track in terms of the fact that you've got two basic plots here. One, of course, is the continued kidnapping of Josette by Barnabas, the attempts he uses to psychologically brainwash her into becoming Josette. I am so
that
impressed.
Freaking music box.
And it's very interesting about the music box because at the end of one episode, I have to look to find out which. I don't want to go back to the bloopers. I'm getting there were so many of them. Oh, for God's sakes! In one episode, in the last scene of an episode, the music box is in Josette's room. In the first scene of the next episode, the music box is in the hallway on the table. So so talking about the music box, for God's sakes, what I was so impressed with Catherine Leigh Scott's performance in this block. I mean, she literally she displayed the anguish. I maybe a couple of points, maybe at some points she may have overdone it a couple of times, but I really think that she was I really think that she was fantastic in the in the interpretation, and then regressing to childhood when she was found on the beach, and then that great scene where she screams in the hospital room when Joe and Sam come to when Joe and Sam come to visit with her, and then she's like, lock her up, you know. Oh boy, I mean, take the key and lock her up. She's scary. She is scary.
I thought she did a fantastic job in those scenes.
Yeah, scream queen as far as I'm concerned. She could.
I mean, what I found quite interesting about this is that for the first time, we actually got to see Dark Shadows juggle two storylines effectively.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't. I mean, up until this point, I have to sit there and say that if it went away from the main storyline, like, oh God, really? And then you think, oh, you kind of sit and bearing it until we get back to the exciting storyline. Like here, they actually made the Elizabeth storyline with Jason McGuire very interesting. And also, it's like I actually, probably from the first time that they started the storyline, I actually became invested in the storyline, which I wasn't invested in that storyline before. So we had
Which one was that?
The Jason McGuire and Elizabeth storyline about Paul's daughter,
Elizabeth, and the whole thing.
We had that, and then we also had this other, the exciting one, the Maggie, being held captive, and the Barnabas storyline.
Right.
It's a counterpoint, though, don't you think, Keith? Because you do have, the Maggie Barnabas thing is what the heck is going to happen. And remember, put yourself now in the place of the fact that it's starting to get summer. This was in June, July of '67, and the kids were being let out of school. So the kids really had a chance to watch it and get into it.
Right.
So you have that, but then as a counterpoint, you have the more traditional soap opera thing, which they know they have to wrap up. They have to wrap up the being dead in the basement. And Liz, by the way, finally tells Vicky, Liz tells Vicky about the fact that she lets it out that she believes she murdered Paul, but you have the two of them interacting with each other, and in a way, I mean, Jason's persnickety attitude and
he's such a turd. He really is.
But what's also quite interesting? We're actually dealing with two stories about two women held hostage. We got Maggie held hostage, and we got Elizabeth held hostage, and they're like two spectrums of what it means to be held hostage by the past, and someone holding a secret over you, and hostage about someone actually keeping you as a hostage. And it's quite interesting that we get these two storylines playing against each other, and they work really, really well with each other as well. Because I said before, I mean, it's like you get the Maggie thing, and you go, oh, what's happening with Maggie? What's happening with Maggie? And then we get the switch side, where all of a sudden, the blackmail of Elizabeth's daughter has been turned up to 100, another 180 degrees, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, here we go. It's like, and I have to give Joan Bennett some credit.
I was just going to say, yes.
For the first time, we can see her losing control of the situation. Where at the first time you see now, all of a sudden she's vulnerable, and we've never seen Elizabeth's daughter vulnerable before, and we do get that in this segment.
Well, it's also very interesting, and I agree with you, Keith. I think that Joan Bennett, you got to give her a lot of credit because she really acted this well.
She's such a badass.
And I think, she was drawing on her years of experience, and she was really able to put this, the fact that she really loves Carolyn, and she loved her so much that she finally conquered her mild agoraphobia and
to go to the jail
to see her, and then to get a kick in the ass like that from Carolyn. I wanted to choke Carolyn, because Carolyn is really, this is the worst in terms of the character. I mean,
talk overreacting, acting out, little brat gets her ass beat.
Well, they're both brats. Her and Buzz, they're both brats. But I mean,
but I have to say the important thing about Carolyn, though, which you're never quite fully aware, is that before, the thing is, you didn't really understand what Carolyn knew about her father. Right. But now we're under the impression that actually she holds her father in high regard, that he's kind of like this man who'd gone away, but he was like the perfect man. And which, of course, Elizabeth, now we know that Elizabeth's going to shield her. Because up until this point, we knew that Paul's daughter went away, and we knew that Paul's daughter wasn't the greatest person for Elizabeth.
Right.
We don't know any of the particulars, but we knew that Paul's daughter, whatever happened, he wasn't a very nice person.
Right.
But we always assumed that Carolyn, up until this point, was under the impression that, her father probably wasn't a nice person. But now, all of a sudden, we know for a fact that Carolyn thinks her father was wonderful. Exactly. Because it is that missing parent scenario where, it's like an orphan who thinks that, they were giving up because their parents were wonderful and they just couldn't, something tragic happened that they couldn't keep them. Which I thought was quite a nice added touch to the storyline.
She was young and she was acting out. I mean, who didn't? I think a lot of people, even especially the younger people, could probably in some
but she's also
regard.
She's also getting mixed. Yeah, but she's also getting mixed signals from Liz also, because if you remember, at one point, Liz actually tried to tell Carolyn the fact that he was mean, he was horrible to me, he was this, he was that, but now on the other hand, schizophrenically, you have Jason telling Carolyn what a nice guy he was, and what a sense of humor he had.
Oh my God! You want to strangle somebody? You want to strangle Jason?
What are you talking about now? And so you've got these. So Carolyn is really conflicted. She's hearing Jason, who she really doesn't like, talk about what a great guy he was. She hears her mother, who she loves, talking about what a rotter he was. This is this must have driven her crazy. God, I'm amazed.
Also, Jason's bullying Willie, and Willie used to be a real badass James Dean kind of guy in the beginning. I know that they changed it out a little bit when they changed the actors. But it just really bothers me how he pushes Willie around so much. Just like, Willie, stab him, something.
Well, Willie lets him, and that's the whole.
But Willie lets him because Willie's trying to protect him. Even though we got
trying to protect all of
James Carlin, I think he's protecting Jason from Barnabas, because that's what it's about. So therefore, Willie's for me, how I gather this is that Willie's letting himself be bullied by Jason, because if he does that, because if Jason does go any closer, or steps across that line, Jason's going to be dead.
That's a good subtle.
Barnabas is going to go after Jason, and we do get some. We do get Barnabas, questioning what Jason is doing, and Barnabas is starting to get irritated by by Jason at this point. And so I thought, because and even though we get to the Willie from the beginning and the Willie at that and the James Carlin Willie, but what we do get with Willie is that Jason's always been like a father figure, and that's been consistent. So to me, even though Willie's allowing this to happen with the way Jason's treated, to me, it's like Willie is letting this happen because he's figured, well, you can do this, but if I take the pushing and I can keep you away from what's going on in the old house, I can protect you. Well, and that's how I'm taking it.
Well, I think that's more of a subtext, though, and you point out a very subtle subtext that really doesn't come out so much in this block. It might come out later on. I don't want to actually say what's going to happen, but Willie really is more interested in protecting Maggie. That is the main focus. And
he's about protecting everyone, though. Willie's become the protector. There's Barnabas. If anyone visits the old house, whether it's Sam or whether it's Joe or whether it's Victoria or whether it's Carolyn,
he wants to keep them all away.
He's protecting them away from Barnabas.
That's true.
But I guess what I'm talking about, because I was really impressed by the interplay between John Carlin and Catherine Leigh Scott in this block.
Right.
Because they're really feeding off each other to an extent, because they are both victims of Barnabas. And And he's trying to, and he wants to protect her to such an extent that he gives her poison. He would rather kill her than have her subjected to the curse of the living dead. In
the previous block that we did, you got to remember, he took a beating from Maggie as well.
That's true. Yeah, He did.
He put himself in harm's way, and to be honest,
Barnabas,
Barnabas beats him, and Barnabas could have killed him if he wanted to. Sure. Barnabas holds back and doesn't. So he put himself in the harm's way, because the thing is, at this point we don't know how far Barnabas will go and how evil Barnabas is. Well, we know that he drinks blood for to keep himself alive, but we haven't actually seen Barnabas cross any lines yet. But we know that he's going to try to kill Maggie. We do know that, and we know that this is going to happen.
Well, the turning point. Do you think that
Barnabas kind of lost his mind being the undead? Because remember what a stand-up guy. Well, he's back in the day. He comes from a time when chivalry. We don't
know about that yet.
Unfortunately, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about.
Unfortunately. Yeah, but unfortunately, what we do get, because all we got is like, we know that Josette was a ghost. We know that him and Josette were supposed to be married at this stage. And we know that something happened that Josette.
But we don't really know about his character per se.
And so we don't really know what the situation is at this point. But, from the way the storyline's playing out, and I know that we've all gone past this point, so we know what's coming up. But if we look at this with fresh eyes and just look at where we are at this moment, it's kind of hard to understand exactly what Barnabas and Josette's relationship was, because at this point, Barnabas seems like a bit of a bully at this point. The thing is, like, he's got this love for this woman who's committed suicide for God. We don't know what the reason is here. And he's trying to mold someone into this Josette person. So, and the thing is, and you're kind of wondering, at this point, did Josette jump off to get away from Barnabas because he's such a horrible boyfriend?
Right.
This was her alternative, is either be married to him or die. So we don't really know the ins and outs.
We don't know whether he was married. Remember, where we are in this block right now, we don't know about marriage. We don't know about.
Well, we know that they're boyfriend and girlfriend, and we know that at that point that she jumped off Widow's Hill, and the reason why, and I'm assuming they were married because she's considered as one of the widows who jumped off of Widow's Hill. And now the only thing we know about Josette at this point is that Barnabas was in love with Josette.
We do know that she was a Collins, though. She is.
And that's what I was going to. Good for you, Vicky. And we do know that she was married to Jeremiah. Now, and this is from
we don't find out about that Jeremiah until later on. So,
but he's mentioned. Is he mentioned back in the original episodes? Yeah.
Okay,
when they get the book,
actually.
Right? They're looking at the book, and so it's mentioned that he was. So she was married to him, and she fell over. There was something about their relationship sour, and of course, this was before Barnabas came on, and so they were just dealing with that.
Okay.
So we do know that. So we do know that. So we are getting.
He is a bully, though. I mean, he does beat Willie. I mean, and he locks some poor girl up in a cell in the basement, trying to force her to be somebody she's not. She wants to get away from him, and he really was in hot pursuit as soon as he didn't know what door to go to, door one or door two to go chasing after her. But he was all hell bent on finding her.
Well, but there is a stalker element to Barnabas' love for Josette, and because we will get the story eventually.
Right.
But at this moment, you're kind of looking at this going, God almighty. I mean, maybe it's being locked up in a coffin. Okay, he's locked up in a coffin.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Did he lose his mind?
But because I guess he's still conscious, isn't he, when he's in that coffin? So I guess he had 200 years to think
about it.
Maybe, so.
And by the way, I really love the scene where he's sleeping in the coffin, but the coffin is open. So maybe he needed some fresh air, in terms of why all of a sudden the coffin was open. Probably Jonathan didn't, Jonathan. Maybe Jonathan just needed the break. But where it really does change, and I'm going to re-emphasize this. But where it really changes when Barnabas has a conversation with Jason McGuire, really for the first time, and Jason,
about
Liz? Because Barnabas offers. This is the first time we actually see Barnabas offering to protect the family.
Right.
When he has that conversation with Jason. And we see that, of course, Jason is just a real egotistical smartass, and of course, Jason's also very clever. But Jason's mistake is to say, "I want to know who you are, Barnabas. I want to know more about you." And Barnabas is looking at him like, "Oh, you're on my list now, Mr. McGuire." But Keith, as I was saying. The conversation between Jason and Barnabas is really the first instance that we see where Barnabas is actually taking a stand to protect the family. Because Liz, he really likes Liz. He really respects Liz. There's a reason for that. I don't want to get into that now.
Family to Barnabas is everything, though, isn't it? Because when he first shows up, it's all about the Collinses, and the old house is about the Collinses' homestead and the Collinses' history, it's
because of her resemblance to someone that we don't want to get into right now, and that's the real reason. But he does, but because he realizes that she's so upset over this, and she's so torn. And Barnabas, because Willie has talked to Barnabas about Jason, so he's told him everything. So he confronts Jason to protect the family. This to me is the first time that we are actually seeing a turn from the evil, sadistic monster that he has been to the protector of the people he is beginning to hold dear to him, because this family
kind of beginning to hold dear, but I don't think he has massive love for them though.
It's a process.
But then again, you have to remember that every true villain does hold something dear to them, whether they're, Ed Gein might have killed women, but he loved his mother. He would do anything to protect his mother. If you look at serial killers, there's something,
right.
they will protect their family.
The Psycho movie.
Yeah, it's all about, protecting the mother, and Barnabas is about protecting the family, protecting the Collins name. I mean, to be honest, it would have been very easy for him to feed off anybody at Collins, in the new house. Collins would. It'd be really easy, but he'd make sure that he feeds away from anyone that's connected to the family.
Right now,
and I'm sure that if Maggie did not hold a resemblance to Josette, which he thinks that there's a resemblance there.
Well, wasn't there like a tug of war when they were going to produce this? Like, was she going to look like Victoria, or was she going to look like Maggie?
Personally, we did ask Kathleen Scott about if she'd get part of Josette because she played the ghost.
I just don't remember.
And she didn't really comment on it. But I do think that with her, I think what kind of pushed her into maybe being the Josette where Victoria wasn't, is that she did play the ghost. And so therefore, so therefore when she's playing the ghost of Josette, so therefore it makes more sense to have her be maybe Josette reincarnated into Maggie, or Barnabas would think is the reincarnation of Maggie.
Right. Well, also because up to that point, they were actually thinking, if you remember her story, she happened to come in to the set when it was her day off, and they had a mannequin, and they were going to use the mannequin to portray Josette in some way. And she said, no, I can do this. And so that's how she got into it accidentally.
And the question is, if she never did that, maybe it would have been Victoria. Because they did give a nod to that over and over. Right. But then again, if that was the nod, then it would have been very hard to have Victoria play Josette and Victoria, because there are scenes that Josette's ghost and Victoria have scenes together. So, and I don't think they had the money for split screen. I don't think they were going to do a Haley Mills Parent Trap there on Dark Shadows.
I guess it worked out in a way, because eventually Alexandra Moltke had to leave the show because of the pregnancy. But Catherine Leigh Scott was on a lot longer, until, and this is a long time down the road, when Catherine Leigh Scott finally left when she got married and left for Paris. And that's a very interesting story, that she put love at the head of everything, to be honest, I think if she didn't do this part, I'm not quite sure what her future would have been in the show, because her story was always like, I guess she would have been like Burke Devlin at the moment, because once Burke Devlin's storyline pretty much came to a close, they don't know what to do with him, and it's hard to slot him into storylines. Where with Maggie in the storyline is now Maggie is now an integral part of Dark Shadows now because of this Josette storyline. But before that, she would just be there. She'd just comment on the actions going on around her, and that's pretty much all she did up until this point. Absolutely. This woman came to the cafe. Oh, Laura, Laura Collins. It's like, oh, that's horrible about Laura. And then that's go on, and then she had like a few scenes with Joe. So okay, Joe's run off for her because she's the only. It's either her or Vicky that Joe's going to run off with. So okay, but that's storyline's not really going. It didn't really go there.
Take off really.
Well, there's no excitement. It's love at first sight, and it's nice to see them together. But unless they have like fights and break up, and one of them sleeps around or something like that, you don't really have a storyline there. But with Maggie's, but with Maggie coming into this, now Maggie's into the fold. So now she's part of the story. Now she's got a storyline sort of thing, and which she never really had before. Daddy's drinking. Oh, what am I going to do about father? Oh. And then two weeks later, oh, I'm so worried about my father. He's drinking again. And that's pretty much Maggie's storyline up until this point, or commenting or town gossip. She's a town gossip.
Catherine Lee Scott really had the opportunity here, which she took to explore the range that she had as an actress. And of course, she counterplayed. She and Carolyn were unbelievable. Because you still have Carlin's, and I can't stop talking about it. I mean, you still have Carlin's, Renfield-like character, and also I wanted to discuss the Stockholm Syndrome with you, Ruth, because I'm kind of wondering whether that fits, whether what Willie had with Barnabas kind of fit that role.
I think it is Stockholm Syndrome for Willie, but there's also with Willie, and the thing that's kept Willie consistent is self-preservation.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of thing. So he's always wants, the thing is in order to make sure that, that
stays alive.
Well, it stays alive, but we also know that there have been times that Willie's tried to leave, but he's always been haunted by the voice. Barnabas is always inside his head. We know that whenever he tried to veer too far away from Barnabas, that Barnabas was inside his head, and he always had to return.
Right.
And now, I mean, this is at the beginning. I'm not. And this is where things get a bit fuzzy with Willie, because we're not quite sure if this is the same. This is still going, because Willie doesn't really leave the old house at all. He doesn't. I don't know where he gets his building supplies from.
I was going to say,
house or the painting or anything like that.
Jack of all trades, because that house got that done like lickety split. He must be master craftsman at electricity, furniture, woodwork.
Well, we do have a little bit of an inkling, because Jason says he saw Willie going to the bank to sell the jewels.
Yeah, so we do have that, but it was on the request of Barnabas, though.
Right.
So was it that Barnabas was able to get outside of his head, so therefore Willie was able to do that? Because we have to remember when Barnabas first bit Willie, Barnabas had control over Willie the whole time, and Barnabas had control over Maggie when he was biting her as well.
Exactly.
And now that and we don't know that Maggie going into her childlike state now that she's at the sanitarium, is just because Barnabas is still in her head somewhere.
Probably is.
Because we're not quite sure.
I believe that's true, because that was the whole, she's a child at first, and calling the father Papa, and remembering all these things that happened when she was 10 years old. But then when later and after, it's a funny thing, because after Julia starts treating her, she starts to get worse.
Yeah, go figure.
Some Dr. Keith. I mean, she's, but when she has that big seed, about take the key and lock her up, she is dealing with with what she's been trying to block out, and it's tearing her apart. And now already the regression is starting to cease, and she is remembering certain things that she doesn't want to remember, which is why she goes crazy the way she did. By the way, I want to say, what do you think about this curfew thing? Everybody's in a curfew supposedly, but it's okay for Vicky to visit Barnabas after the curfew starts, and it's okay for Barnabas to go out, of course.
But aren't they on the same property? It doesn't curfew mean if you go, if there's a curfew here, I'm pretty sure I can go to the next door neighbors, but I probably couldn't go to the neighbor a block away.
It's on the same estate. Technically, it's Collinwood.
So, and that's probably what
I don't think it's ever delineated. So when they say it's a curfew, it's like nobody can go out after a certain time.
Then Carolyn keeps going to the Blue Whale to do a jig.
There you go. What happened to the curfew there? Well, I agree with you. What happened there? So that was a continuity glitch as well. But
then again, maybe the curfew was lit. I mean, that's another thing that we're not quite sure how Barnabas is feeding himself at this point, because
they don't really specify, do they?
Oh, they do.
Well, we know we know there was bodies at the beginning, and we know that there was cows. But
Well, after
it doesn't seem like
Maggie-
the cows and the women that seems to be let off, or obviously it's just because it happens so often they just don't report it anymore.
I guess.
Well, actually, we do know that after Maggie, there was a report of another attack on a woman. So he's gone back to attacking women, and which is
I guess is his food source, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, it's better than cows. I'll tell you that much. Or Willie's wrist, but
Willie's wrist.
But yeah, but
well, you could have fed off Buzz if you.
Yeah.
Turn into the bat sitting on the back of the motorcycle feeding off Buzz.
Do we have any visuals of the bat yet at this point?
No, not yet.
Okay.
You'll see that.
They do come on, and unfortunately,
It's going to be.
it won't set the special effects budget on fire, but it
No.
helps with the love and our love of Dark Shadows.
But yeah, Bill Baird, the famous puppeteer, will do the bat, and that's
Dark Shadows and starts edging Ed Wood areas. But
what'd you think when Sarah came onto the scene?
the thing about Sarah is that she's a cute girl, and I think that she delivers her lines very, very well. But the only thing that always bothers me of Sarah, and the thing is,
London Bridge.
well, obviously we don't get too much of that now, but as the storyline goes on, it gets to the point where it's like, come on, I kind of wish that. I mean, I'm sure they use London Bridge because they don't have to pay song rights for it, but it would have been quite nice if they could have used like some kind of old-fashioned, another kind of tale that kind of had like a bit of a twist to it,
Right.
Or Cobert could have written something that had that kind of like an old English kind of sound to it or something.
Right.
Well, I think they wanted something to identify the child's tune. They wanted something to identify.
Well, other than being annoying with the music box, though, that's quite a lovely tune, actually.
Well, actually, that's the first music box tune.
And it was quite
there's
interesting
two
to hear the
tunes.
different verses. Yeah, it was quite interesting to hear different verses of London Bridge because I didn't realize there's that many bridges. I don't know if they were original to London Bridge or they wrote those for them, but there were some interesting verses that you never hear before.
Right.
Well, that is, I think those were at least a couple of those were come from original. What I did want to say is that Sharon Smith is very tolerant when she goes to the Dark Shadow. When she went to the Dark Shadows conventions, all the fans wanted her to sing London Bridge. So they all. Can you imagine a group of adults in the room and they're saying "London Bridge is falling down"? All the adults here in the room
sing along with Sarah.
Sing along with Sarah.
The bouncing ball and the words.
Right.
I mean,
bouncing ball.
I mean, the only thing
they didn't have the bouncing ball prop yet. That would have been next.
I mean, the only thing that bothers me about the Sarah thing is I think it's a very interesting curve to the show, and I like that there is a connection there with Barnabas, and that when we get past this, it's going to be quite interesting. The only thing that does bother me is that no one seems to understand her style of dress.
Right. Do they find this normal with the colonial cap and?
Well, no, I think David mentioned it.
Well, David mentions it, but the thing is like with Maggie, and at this point, Maggie hasn't. Maggie's mind hasn't yet fractured. It's about to fracture. As soon as the doll happens, that's when the Maggie fracturing mind starts.
Right.
But the thing is, it's kind of thing like she appears and she's not there. And then she does appear. Does she appear Willie at this point in this episode?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then she appears to Sam as well.
Right.
And to be honest,
to let him know where she is.
Yeah, and it just seems weird that she no one seems that surprised by her appearing and disappearing.
This
and no one's questioning.
Child.
I mean, David's probably the only one that's actually questioned it. And and then again, David tells other people, which has a definite because David's always considered to be slightly in La La Land, even though David sees a lot and he does see stuff that's in another realm, ghosts and stuff like this. But as far as the adults are concerned, David's just David sort of thing.
Well, but David's a veteran ghost sighter,
Yeah, and they don't. I mean. And we've had storylines up until this point that even though they have seen the ghost and they've experienced Josette, then for some reason, a month goes by and it's like Josette no one's ever seen Josette before, and you're like, sort of thing. But so I find that a bit. It's like no one's ever questioned why is this girl appearing and disappearing and in her state of dress.
Exactly.
And so I always found that a bit odd.
Even Sam. Sam sits there, puts her on the chair, and he doesn't. It's just like nobody's. It's like I guess it's what comes with living in Collinsport. I guess it's just the mindset.
People just run around in colonial gear once in a while.
Everything's possible, that's for sure. There are some nice lines, by the way, that I do want to mention. And in the first episode, when Liz says to Jason, "I'd die before I married you," and Jason says, "Well, let's hope you don't have to go that far." Yeah. And then when Roger comes in, I think it was Vicky and Carolyn, and they're in the den, and Roger comes in. When they're talking about David, and Roger comes in. Well, here we all are, the PTA. I think there's once again they managed to inject some this sardonic double entendre. You see the double entendre humor, which is going to be such a hallmark. And that kind of serves as a comedic aside to all the craziness that's going on. And they also have one or two nice film shots from the from earlier episodes of the show when David's on the swing, although they never explain the fact that in the film version the swing is at the back of the house, and then when they go back to camera the swing is in the front of the house. So once again, but again I mention that because you're not going to see. This is really kind of the last gasp for the filmed scenes.
Yeah, I know. I remember they do trail off, don't they?
They do. No, they do. And you're not going to see film scenes anymore. I suspect within another month or so, they're going to vanish altogether. And
now, I think we need to talk about Buzz.
Yes.
For me, I quite like. The thing is, Buzz is quite memorable for all the wrong reasons. And the thing is, this has nothing to do with the actor whatsoever, because I think the actor does. I think he does a fantastic job for what he's given.
Yeah.
But I think this is one of these cases where we got maybe elderly screenwriters writing for younger characters, which are kind of slightly out of touch with.
Exactly.
Possibly.
But I think that I found even more distressing is that the person who's dressing them, the costume designer for Buzz, has got it so off.
I have to agree.
They're not in touch. These people are not in touch with the hippie generation.
Well, even if they went for like 1950s biker, they could have gone for that look. But I mean, it's like the fairy boots are totally off. The patent leather coat. I mean, why not just give him a leather jacket? You know what I mean? It's kind of like.
Well, this is interesting, and it may shed some light. The character, that name Buzz, where that comes from? Comes from your favorite film, Keith, with James Dean.
Rebel Without a Clue.
Rebel Without a Clue.
Rebel Without a Cause.
The Sal Mineo character, I believe his name is Buzz, and that's where they got that, and that's where they got. So they are really taking that lead from that movie in developing, in my opinion, the character.
But that was like a 1950s character stuck in a 1967 setting. So,
and then it all makes sense.
It's just because I think that, and then you know what I kind of wish they'd done with the Buzz character is that they could have dressed him like old Willie. And gave him that old Willie kind of that kind of personality where he's kind of threatening. But Buzz is kind of person is like he's like a fly. You just kind of like swat him. You just kind of swats him away.
Well, it seems like Buzz is always buzzed and he's harmless.
Yeah, and even it's kind of like, we get the scene where Buzz has got, to show that Buzz is hard. Buzz has got his feet up on the banister, and he's sitting there smoking a cigarette in the staircase, and Jason comes down and goes,
I know. Well, I can always step on your ankle there, and you'll have a nice time of it.
Yeah, and then there's no fight from Buzz, and there's really no fight from Buzz at all. And then we get this weird thing from Buzz where Jason's sister is going to not blackmail, but buy off Buzz with a motorcycle. And then he said, and then Buzz says something very bizarre. It's like, I really don't need the money. It's like he comes from money. So you're thinking, is he like a rich kid? He's playing delinquent, or is he a delinquent, or does he come from the poor side of town? It's kind of an interesting thing because we don't really get an essence of who Buzz is. It's like we're judging. It's like they made Buzz like this two-dimensional character, and because of the way he dresses, he's a bad influence. And it would have been quite nice if they put some more into the script and give us a reason why Buzz is a bad influence.
One of the bloopers, and again, I tell you, these are things, and you're talking about them, and it comes back. The actor Michael Hatch actually mixed up a line, and this led to a blooper. What he was supposed to say when he's talking to Jason is, she comes from a family that makes big money. I come from a family that makes big noise. But what he said was, he mixed it up. She comes from a family that makes big noise, and I come from a family that makes big money.
Oh, okay.
That screwed it up. He transposed it. He transposed it. But in answer to your question, Keith, I think that he's really trying to explain, that he's not a dope. He's not a dope. And
he's very smart. I mean, he comes up. He's very intelligent. Once we got that blue whale scene, we actually realized that there's a brain going on inside this.
Right.
And he knows exactly what he's doing.
And the fact that he's able, something, there's this perverse loyalty. He could very well have been bought off by Jason. Jason was offering to get him a new motorcycle. If he was really a son of he would have said, well, I want more than that. And he could have milked Jason for what he was worth. But instead he just said, no, I'm not doing it. And, and Carolyn was afraid that he might. She walks in and, well, did you take him up on his offer? She was actually afraid for a couple of seconds.
Speaking of, wasn't Jason like forcing Liz to buy him expensive clothes at a tailor?
That was in the last block. Yeah,
But see, another thing about what would have been quite nice about Buzz is that, when we find out that Buzz has got a bit more of a brain. So, but another thing is that it would have been nice if the writers gave him a little bit more substance. Because the thing is like, did he refuse to, it's like, I can give you $500 or you can marry me and have $1 million. Mm-hmm. So was it that?
But I don't think they wanted to concentrate on the Buzz thing so much. I think my gut feeling is that he was there, that Buzz was there as a filler. And I didn't know how long he was going to last. And they were really interested in, obviously, the Barnabas thing, and then also clearing up the murder mystery, which has been going on since time immemorial about, So that's what they really wanted to do. But
even if they gave Buzz Elizabeth's daughter some sass. He doesn't even give her sass. He just shows up and she's like, I don't like you because you're riding a motorcycle. It's like, okay. Well.
Right.
And then you look at Elizabeth's daughter and go, oh God, you're judging the book by its cover. That's not very good.
I liked it when he would take off down what was supposed to be the front of the mansion. You could hear that motorcycle sound.
The leader of the pack.
And you got little David imitating the motorcycle. He's running around. Either he's making like a kangaroo in this thing with the thing with Vicky. He's hopping like a kangaroo, or he's imitating the motorcycle.
But see, and this is another thing about Buzz. He has a soft side because he all goes, oh yeah, little buddy, I'll give you a ride in my motorcycle. So he's not a horrible person. And
you got Victoria looking at him like he needs to be like he's a bug that needs to be squashed.
Well, I mean, Victoria is, he's just like, Buzz, he's only in his 20s. She should be going out with a man in his 50s. But she doesn't say that. But we've seen the way that we looked at how Elizabeth, Normandy's characters act. Like, I think this is the first time that
It's
Well,
not
no,
just,
Joe is probably somewhere around Carolyn's age, so this is probably the only time that we see someone that's age
Joe has a
appropriate
nice
for Carolyn.
Joe has a nice little talk with Carolyn at the docks, saying,
What do you think that Carolyn's supposed to be like 19 at this time?
she's 19 going on 8 right now.
Well, I have to sit there and say the best line is when she comes in from a night out with Buzz, and she goes, and Elizabeth goes, "Carolyn, go up to your room." Go to your room. Mom. Really? You're gonna really do that? So, but yeah. So I mean, I think it would have been, if in an ideal world in Dark Shadows Land, it would have been nice if there was a bit of danger with Buzz, but Buzz doesn't seem that dangerous. It's kind of like, okay, yeah, you might, if he had that sense of danger. I mean, I have to sit there and say that his rolling cigarettes are quite thick. I'm quite like, God almighty. I mean, he was smoking that cigarette. They go and have a whole scene, and they come out, and he's still smoking that cigarette, and you could tell it's the same cigarette. So
yeah.
But yeah. So I think that the actor does a really good job, and I have to sit there and say that even though he's not a major player in this, and and in the next block, he does disappear quite quickly and quite fast, but he's always remembered. Everyone always remembers Buzz, so he made a lasting impression. If you consider all the characters that are coming through this series and the 2,100 some odd episodes, Buzz is one of the ones that you remember, so you have to give him credit.
But you remember Buzz because of his interaction with Carolyn, one of the major characters.
And I must note that was a wig.
But then I guess what my idea of Buzz was, it'd been nice that when they went to the Blue Whale and then everyone kind of looked at Buzz in disgust. They could have the extras look at him in disgust or something. I guess
I would have liked a little more James Dean. A little more James Dean, possibly.
A little bit more, maybe sexy dangerous,
something. And they could have done that easily.
Like Marlon Brando in the Wild Ones, or
but he had those glasses on and that jacket. I don't even know bikers now, and I know a lot of them that wouldn't put that jacket on if you paid them to put that jacket on.
Well, I mean, as I said before, he does look like he come out of a beach party movie.
He looks like a Marilyn Manson groupie.
With the chain.
He looks like a suburban kid trying to play bad, I guess is what he comes across.
But I think he had that, and this is very interesting, that necklace that he wore, was that a Madonna kind of necklace or something like that?
Yeah, poor guy. I mean, and he brought it to the table, too. It's not his fault. It was the writers.
And obviously, someone studied his jacket for him in a really weird.
What did they do? Run to the Salvation Army really quick?
It kind of feels like they got it off one of those street peddlers on the New York streets. It's like, this is real leather. And he's like, no, it isn't.
This is Italian leather.
Yeah, Italian leather. It's really stylish.
But there is no doubt, though, that whatever, we can make fun or whatever, but Michael Hadge has put his imprimatur on Dark Shadows.
He did. I mean, I have to give him credit.
Yeah, me too.
I bypassed this, and the first time I ran through this before we even started the podcast, I do own the DVD box set, and I worked myself up to 1900 something episodes, and out of all those characters, I always remember Buzz. When I bypass,
he's memorable.
I remember Buzz.
Can't forget Buzz, that's for sure. And there's also and you also start to wonder, Buzz, is it true that men with facial hair, with the exception of Barnabas, is it true that men with facial hair are evil characters on the show? Because you think about that, Buzz is. Well, no.
I don't really, but going through all the episodes in my mind, who's got a beard? I'm trying to think who's got a beard. David
Thayer's character was, I guess, evil, and he had a beard.
He had like
Laura Collins had a little bit of face hair. They wouldn't have did a close-up.
Oh, that's terrible. She used Nair by the fire. Is that what she did?
It's got a bit of peach fuzz going on there.
You had to heat up the Nair by the fire while she was
I wouldn't have really suggest that, tell you the truth.
Well,
Not a chemical thing, anyway.
We won't be interviewing her anytime soon.
I wish we could.
Same. I love
Dinah Miller.
She's not well, and
I love Dinah Miller.
What a wonderful actress. Beautiful.
I may want to reach out and see what's happening with that. I'm gonna give that a shot if I can.
Now, another thing. Did you find Sam's character with saying that Maggie may be dead? Did you find that kind of an odd thing that it kind of like, it's kind of sad, but kind of accepted it in a weird way?
Well, but we know that she isn't, though.
No, but we know, but Sam doesn't, and Joe doesn't.
Oh, okay. I got ahead of myself, like I always do.
So when Sam goes and tells Barnabas that Maggie's probably dead,
right,
and then Barnabas says, "Oh, I'm so sorry to hear," sort of thing. Then kind of like smiles to the side.
Thank goodness for that. She's rid of the. Yeah.
Well, I don't.
I found that Sam's, the way that Sam was written at that point, I found that's kind of like, well, this is your only daughter, and this is the daughter that takes care of you. I thought that there'd be a bit more mourning or a bit more sadness or something.
No, he gave up really quickly, that's for sure.
Yeah, I found that kind of odd.
And nobody saw that. I mean, why aren't you grieving for her more? What I found very odd is that Dr. Woodard, and it is Woodard, by the way, in case the fans start running after us for Woodward. But when Dr. Woodard, and I think it actually one of the other actors or actresses mispronounced it also, Vicky. So you're off the hook. But Dr. Woodard goes ahead and says, "Let me sign a false death certificate. Let me declare her dead," and doesn't get the police involved. Isn't that, well, of course they're not going to get the police involved.
But it's Collinsport.
Well, yeah, but I mean, to be honest, if it was a Collins that was doing this, I can understand, but Sam, the town drunk?
Right. And yeah, so.
I mean, if it was Elizabeth Stott or Roger going, "This is my town, I'm a Collins, and you're going to do as I say," sure, but.
He's sticking his neck out, risking in the real world. He could have his license could have been. He would have gotten a nice slap on the wrist for doing that, but along with the criminal implications, But
though I have to sit there and say what I did think was quite clever about the script, though, is when they told Victoria and Carolyn the reason why there wasn't going to be a funeral is because Sam didn't want people showing up as gawkers and to gossip about it, which I thought that was actually quite a nice touch in the script. I thought that was clever. I give him that cleverness for that.
I wouldn't be surprised if Joe Caldwell were behind that, as well as a few of the others, because Joe Caldwell was actually a pretty good writer, and he needed the money at the time, which is why he came on board. But he kind of gave things. He was a fresh pen, and Marmerstein was great. Sprout was great. There's no doubt about that. But that was a nice little. He wrote some nice dialogue. I think.
I thought that was quite good because it kind of like finished it off a little bit. Because when you're telling about, okay, we're going to do this and this and this, and you're kind of thinking, okay, well, in reality, okay. But then when she said that, it's like, okay, well, this makes sense. So it kind of like brought it back to making sense. And I thought that, and this is another thing, that Victoria's kind of torn up about Maggie's death.
Mm-hmm.
And then Carolyn has to go at her, and then he tells Carolyn, and Carolyn mourns, and then new day. Okay, next. And it's like, we had this whole, 2 to 3 minutes of dialogue where
flash in the pan stuff.
that Maggie was like her best friend, and that's the first person she said hello to, which is quite nice. That we have a nod to how the show began, which was quite nice. And then it's like, okay, but anyway, what's for dinner? So I'm like, so
yeah, kind of, sorta.
That's funny.
But I mean, I guess I can understand. I mean, they are to work into a schedule and stuff like this. But sometimes you kind of wish that they would hold, something as important as a death of a major character. Even though we know that what's happening, because we know we've been privy to the conversation about what they're going to do to help preserve Maggie and make sure that Maggie's safe. But, it would have been quite nice if they did something where the characters kind of, felt warned a bit more or gave a bit more feeling. Because to them, if, this was real life or these were, this was really happening, Sam would be mourning, so, Sarah shows up and talks to Sam, can you paint my picture? And he's talking about Maggie. And it's like, there's not a longing there that Maggie's dead or something like that. Oh, Maggie's dead. She passed. Well, it's like she's been dead for years. And it's, I just say that they could have done more with that.
The Sam character is a very poor actor when it comes to dealing. He knows that Maggie is alive. And of course he's supposed to pretend she's dead. And he's supposed to be mourning and grieving, but he doesn't get it. He doesn't get it, and it's like
well, he didn't even mourning.
They both have this guilty secret,
mourning when he thinks he's dead.
Same thing with Joe. Yeah. But I think Joe, to his credit, when he has that conversation with Carolyn at the docks, and she says, "Did you love her?" And he goes, "I love her still," and that's very true. And that's very true. That bond between him and Maggie, after all she's gone through, and he's stuck with her all the way. I mean, that's a true. That's something I don't think he could ever have done with bratty Carolyn, who still I think kind of wishes, although she'll never say it because she's bragging about her engagement with Buzz and all this nonsense. But Carolyn still has this regret that she and Joe didn't work out, and Carolyn knows it.
Well, she says it when she says that when she sees Joe, and Joe's longing for Maggie because he thinks at this point he thinks she's dead, and she's out with Buzz, and she comes back says, "Oh, I saw Joe," and you could tell that there's always going to be that longing. Right. Joe's always going to be the man that got away that she was too ignorant to ever have.
That's right.
And I don't think that she we'll find out later on whether what Carolyn has in store for her.
Exactly.
But I don't think Carolyn's ever going to meet anyone that's going to be as good as Joe, as pure as Joe.
Right.
Joe's a pure soul. Yep. He always does what's right, even though it might be totally wrong, but he always does what he thinks is right. Exactly. Joe's always good.
He's such a stand-up guy. I mean,
he's steady.
And what I quite liked about Joe, and I have to give, the thing is, Joe's one of those kind of characters that you kind of take for granted a little bit because of the character that the Joe Crothers is the character that he has. And luckily we're going to, later episode, we actually get to see his acting chops a bit more. But I do think that we do get some nice performances from him, considering that it's kind of a boring part really, but that point where he's talking to Maggie about the doll. And he goes, you want to hold my doll? And he holds her doll. And then that scene between Maggie and Joe is a lovely little scene. And it reminds me of that time when Maggie and Joe are talking about the ships. Mm-hmm. And that's when you actually see Joe Crothers or Joe, the actor, when he has those tender moments, he can do those tender moments really, really well. And those tender moments are the hardest ones to play off. So that, there's a good actor playing the Joe character. So we don't get to see that very often.
And speaking of tender moments, but this is a tender moment that we have a kind of a negative feedback on to me. Anthony George, in his one appearance, if you compare him to Mitch Ryan, this is not the same.
Well, we're going from a wasp to an Italian, so.
Oh.
So you're kind of going, well, because Mitch Ryan is kind of like, white American Irish, isn't he? Kind of, the American good-looking, man with the, the Superman chin and that sort of thing, and then we get the Italian cut.
Well, if you also
kind of like
it was a big change, I have to admit. That was a big change.
If you also look at Anthony George's background, and his real name, by the way, his first name was Octavio George. So that comes from that. He was in The Untouchables with Elliot Ness playing a good guy. He was in Checkmate, which was a 2-season series in the 1960s. He always played good guys. So, and he was most comfortable with that. He actually had to get out of the movies because it was such a big grind for him. He was in a few movies in the 50s. He had a breakdown. And he had to get, so he switched to TV. Believe it or not, it was easier for him. And the soap operas were easier for him. He was in
Well, he's quite a delicate character as well. His delivery is quite. He's not. You're not. You know. Not. When I say delicate, I don't mean effeminate, but
it's softer. It's softer.
It's very soft. We're going to get a soft Burke.
Yeah. Mitchell Ryan was really more overbearing. He kind of empowered himself in the room.
Get used to the old Burke. You get
took over. The old Burke took over.
I think they chose Anthony Georgia because he looked like him. But there is no doubt that the acting style was very, very different, and it was like a culture shock to see them on the beach, and he seems to be more sympathetic to her. Or, as Burke is saying, "Well, come on now, Vicky. In the long run, you know what you have to do. You know that kind of thing." And
I also say the Mitchell Ryan Burke was always the gung ho, the hero. He runs in to save everyone, and now that the Burke storyline is pretty much dead, really. I mean, it's like we don't know what they're going to do. We don't really know what they're going to do with the Burke character at all because there's not much. His storyline's gone, so he's kind of just there. So I can imagine that when they replaced Burke, first of all, I imagine Mitchell Ryan were probably thinking, what the hell are they going to do with me? Because now that my storyline's going with, now he's kind of like coming in and he's kind of doing what other characters do who are not part of a main storyline, coming in and making a little bit of, saying a couple lines for a day and then disappearing for weeks on end and coming back. And Burke's becoming that character, unfortunately. So,
but I think if you give it any, it looks like the character of Burke actually comes from a real life personality trait on the part of Mitch Ryan. Catherine Leigh Scott was emailing me the other day and telling me that Mitch Ryan is very much his own man.
Yeah, I believe that.
Yeah, and makes his decisions, be a very, very independent guy. And this is Burke. Sure. This is Burke. And I said, wow. I mean, so it's just a culture shock. We're used to that. And then when we see Anthony George, even in that one episode, it's just, I was disappointed. Because they really didn't think. They took somebody that looked like him, but they didn't realize that all the background, that all the roles that he had were not of that kind of take charge individual.
I mean, I'm not going past what we've seen, but you do kind of wondering from what we've seen after the big storyline between what happened on that frightful night when Burke got sent to jail. And once that storyline got wrapped up, you kind of wonder what is going to be Burke's next storyline, because it's going to be like dating Victoria again, or it's going to be like dating Carolyn again, or because there's nothing where him to go at the moment. So
you'll find out. Hey, by the way, how do you like when Woodard takes the blood sample from Willie in the old house and doesn't wash his hands? That's nice of him, and decides to have a glass of wine right after. Right. Isn't that great? Wow! If all doctors
it was sherry. Like that. It wasn't wine. It was sherry.
Well, okay, that's right, because he also has Amontillado. Remember, because
that's right.
Roger Amontillado. Well, but I think
and he doesn't use it, but he doesn't do an alcohol strip on the arm when he's taking the blood either. So.
Right.
There you go. There you go. From his finger, he does a finger.
And he didn't do the flicking of the needle either to make sure there's no air bubbles. So, surprise, Willie's still with us.
Yes, this is true. Aspiration. Well, I'm going to let you in on a for those fans that want a little sneak peek. There's a great blooper with Dr. Julia Hoffman taking a patient's blood pressure, and Grayson Hall forgot to put the stethoscope underneath the cuff. So she's got it. Oh no, excuse me. She did put the stethoscope under the. Did she? It's either she didn't put the stethoscope under the cuff or she forgot to put it in her ears. That's it. She forgot to put the stethoscope in her ears when she took the blood pressure. So, so that's a really good way of, I love the way Dark Shadows doctors handle medicine.
Well, yeah, but isn't that one that between the virus and the bacterial infection? That was previous.
Yes. And doing a transfusion on Joe just by accepting his word that he's the same blood type.
I know. I thought about that. That's like, whoa.
But then I guess this is before Google. I mean, nowadays I guess when you're writing a script, you can just Google things really quickly, isn't it? So I guess and you got to remember, I guess these writers, And I guess if I'm going to let them off the hook a little bit, I guess, they probably didn't have a lot of time to go down to the New York Library and do research, I suppose,
I think,
I guess.
To their credit, I think when Liz was calling the Hugh Franklin character, the Garner character, and talking about the divorce and everything, that seemed to be pretty on the money. So you win some, you lose some. They're better lawyers than they are doctors.
I do have to say one thing about for the hair and makeup for Maggie. It was so good that her hair was so messy by the time she escaped from that place. Because up at this point, if any of them, to be honest, if any of them, like whether Victoria's been tied up, hidden behind a bookshelf, or been tied up into the room, or waiting for the fishermen to show up,
they look good,
or whatever. She's always had her hair perfect, but this is the first time I think that we've actually seen a person going through a trauma and don't look their best. And my hat's off there. I thought that was really effective. She had dirt in her hair and her wig or her fall or whatever she's wearing, and you saw bits of clump and stuff in there. And I thought, God, oh,
yep. No, they did a great job there.
So I think Maggie's method. I think Kathleen Scott is a method actress. So
absolutely,
let's go off to her.
She sure showed her stuff.
So I guess that now brings us to our character breaks. So Vicky, who's your favorite character and your least favorite character of these episodes?
I would have to say my favorite character would be Willie, because the struggle is just real. That poor guy. He's got to keep everybody happy. He's getting beat. He's got to give blood. And he's terrified about getting blood. He's got to deal with Barnabas. He's got to deal with the Josette transition down in the cell. He's just got his hands into everything. There's probably hardly nothing he doesn't have to protect everybody from, like as far as Barnabas. And which leads me, and I hate to say this, I'm probably going to get a hate email, send it to Keith. My least, and it wasn't acting, but Barnabas really got on my nerves in these episodes, because he just reminded me of, like he's a dirty old man or something, Well,
I actually can see that. It's it's the same thing with like Bert going after Carolyn or Alexander.
Well, that too, but I mean that wasn't near as annoying. From a 2020
lens looking at it, yeah, I can see that.
But I mean, it's just like Bert didn't lock Carolyn up in a cell and keep her down there and try to turn her into somebody he's not, trying to brainwash her with a beautiful melody. But it's a music box, and that music box over and over and over, and she has to listen to the music box, and then she gets that blank stare. But Barnabas is a big bully boy in this,
Yeah.
And I still think I'm still having a problem with the transition, and it's not his fault. It's the writers. I always tell you about the oxygen getting sucked out of the room. Louis Edmonds, all of them, that had all these. They kind of just take away from all these other great.
It's the Barnabas Collins show at this point. It's the Barnabas Collins.
No, I have to slightly agree with you there. So.
It's nothing that anybody's doing wrong. It's just I'm more disappointed in the writing, not the actors. Like, God, it's like, let's not forget all these other great people with their characters, like Louis Edmonds. Come on. He's one of my favorites. I love him. His one-liners, like, keep it going,
Yeah, you want to see make it more of an ensemble piece instead of a star.
Exactly.
And the rest, everyone's becoming
But it just turns into everything rotates around Barnabas Collins. And he is the story.
Yes,
that poor guy must have been tired. I think that's why they brought in the other unnamed character.
Eventually, yes, that is exactly why. Yeah.
But that's just me. Don't hate me.
What about yourself, Tom? Who's your favorite character and your least favorite character of this block?
Catherine Lee Scott will now love me forever, because I'm going to say that she was the one that made it for me in this block.
She was excellent.
She was unbelievable in terms of the range she had at her interplaying with Carolyn, and I'm giving Carolyn a very close second.
They had great chemistry.
Because, absolutely. The two of them were just so, you really felt their pain. and and maybe it was because of the synergistic effect that.
Well, like you said, they were both prisoners in some capacity.
Correct. Both psychological prisoners. In Willie's case, he was in both their cases, Barnabas bit both of them. So they were both his victims, and they were both interacting with each other. So those are the two best ones. The worst, and I do want to also give Grayson Hall a break. In this first episode, she comes across as a very, very stiff, rigid,
cold and clinical.
Very clinical, very cold. Very cold. That's going to change. She was actually supposed to be on for a limited amount of time, and she was actually supposed to die by being thrown into a vat of acid. A lot of people don't know that. But anyway, the worst to me, I have to say, I did not like Anthony George's performance. Now, it might not have been his fault. Maybe he wasn't given a proper introduction by the writers to add to the kind of stick-to-itiveness and brashness that Mitchell Ryan put into Burke. And there certainly was enough time, I think, to do that. And because they didn't, he had to rely on what he did best. And he did Good Guys best. So I'm guessing he
did. I have to agree with you on that, because Mitchell Ryan was a bad boy, but he was eloquent a bad boy. He did it eloquently. He had I don't know, savoir faire, I don't know, whatever he had, but he pulled it off. Mm-hmm. And I was kind of disappointed too with it. It's not the actor. It's not so much him, but I think it's just how he was told to embrace this part. And it kind of bothers me, because I guess I'm partial. I'm partial, I'll admit it.
Well, I think also that, I really don't think that they gave they gave him enough guidance, and so he had to. Now, of course, we can't talk to him because Anthony George passed away in 2006. Pulmonary issues, from what I understand. But I think that he was simply going on what made him successful, and what made Anthony George successful were those good guy roles. And that's what we got.
But Mitchell Ryan, he had bad boy roles right up into spaghetti westerns. He was always.
Yeah, and so Mitch Ryan was able to capitalize on but it worked.
But I also think
the problem is
they wrote for Mitchell Ryan, didn't they?
That's it.
Yeah.
And the problem is that if Anthony George had been the first Merc, that might have been a different story.
Right.
Then we might have gotten used to that. But
see, we're gonna have quite a few of this, because when a character's been on the show for a long period of time and they get replaced, which we are going to see,
get biased.
Episodes.
Yep.
They don't. I think what happens is I think happens, and I don't have any proof, but this is what I think happens. I think that they write for that actor's strengths. And I think that when they do replace them, they're still writing for the previous actor. Sort of
but
thing.
In later episodes, we can't go into now, he does bring a really good, to the table with certain characters.
Well, Anthony George. That's different.
Yeah.
That's different. And I know what you're talking about. You also, and also finally, Keith, you have to remember that scene where Joe Crothers had to take over the Burke role because he didn't report, because Mitchell Ryan was unfortunately out of it that day, and he's mouthing, and it doesn't work for Joe. It doesn't work for Joe Crothers.
Not at all.
Because he sounded like Burke. Those lines were for Burke. And so he does, and so you can hear, not just a mistake with McGuire, but he doesn't sound like Joe when he's talking to Vicky. And I feel sorry for Joe Crothers, may rest in peace. I feel sorry for what they did to the poor guy. They put that guy, that guy probably had to learn his lines just like that, because he didn't report to work that day or something. So between the early morning and the time they taped, Crothers had to learn that. It wasn't the night before.
Yeah.
I know people are probably wondering what episode that is. You might want to shoot that out.
252.
In case they want to go back.
I mean, and I guess another thing that you have to look at, simple fact, is that, and then plus the lines that Joe is saying to Victoria that those two characters don't have that kind of relationship either.
Right.
Joe and Victoria don't have the same relationship that Burke and Victoria have. So what Burke would say to Victoria is not going to be the same way that Joe is going to speak to Victoria, because they don't have that same kind of
I'm
relationship.
still wondering why he never gave Victoria a ring. She had no ring. No ring. No rock.
They only.
Well, my favorite.
Go ahead.
My favorite and least favorite character is, my favorite character is a tie between Kathleen Scott and Willie, John Carlin, and I have to sit there and say the scenes that they play together are just magnificent. I love the to and froing. I love that there's a slight danger and there's the untrust thing going on, but then there's the caringness, Willie, and there's just so many different things playing. My least favorite character, Sam. I'm sorry, but Sam. I kind of wish that there was a bit of more emotional range for Sam. So therefore, I would have loved to have that grief of Maggie thinking that Maggie's dead,
right?
And the grief and the loss that your daughter is gone and that you don't know where she is.
It is business as usual, isn't it?
Yeah, and then when he does find Maggie, it's kind of like. It's kind of slightly over the top when he does see her. He hasn't seen her, and all of a sudden he finds her on the beach, and it's kind of like, and I kind of want this, sort of this big moment, and I'm missing kissing her, and oh my God, my little girl, and I kind of wanted that, but I didn't really get that. And so for me, what could have been a fantastic, like great big heartfelt moment where you get the shivers going up and down, kind of fell a bit flat, and I think that has to do with. Right. David Ford a little bit, I do like Sam. I think he's fine when he's an alcoholic, but I kind of wish that in these cases, I kind of wish there was more of that emotional resonance. A father mourning their daughter, feeling the loss of their daughter, finding their daughter. And that would have lifted this so much more. But that's just that's my personal view anyway. So now we're into Morning Has Broken. So Tom, what are your final thoughts of this block?
Basically, once again, I think it was well done. I think they dealt with these two separate plots, and as you said, they handled both of them very efficiently and effectively. Everybody that was hoping that Maggie would not die and that Barnabas wouldn't make her what he was, they were satisfied. And a wonderful segue into the introduction of Grayson Hall in terms of that plot, and we'll see what happens there. In the meantime, almost comic relief in a way, although, yes, you had the real Sturm und Drang between Liz and Carolyn. And the writers really, whatever maturity Carolyn had was lost in at least 75% of the episodes in this block, although she did try to, you could see there was some guilt, and Nancy Barrett showed some guilt with on Carolyn's, especially when Carolyn found out Maggie was dead. The true Carolyn came out. It broke through the tremendous anger she had towards her mother, tremendous resentment she had towards her mother. But she really was genuinely sorry when she thought that Maggie had died. I thought that was kind of nice. But in general, I'm a Jason fan. I think that I think that villainy in him. He's such a sneaky, snarky with the Irish accent.
He's a sneaky little shit.
A sneaky little bastard that knows what he's doing in order to get all the money that he wants. And I miss his Willie. I miss that.
Yeah.
But that's his. And then, by the way, they had Jason and they had Patrick, and you can see that on the internet. He attended a couple of California conventions. And they asked Patrick, "Oh, please do Willie again." And Carlin was sitting right next to him, and so Dennis Patrick did Willie, and Carlin nearly fell on the floor laughing. That was a nice moment. So this is well done, and we are finally starting, just a glimmer, but at the end of this block, we are finally starting to see, in my opinion, Jonathan, the Barnabas character, taking on a slightly different role. I personally think that conversation with McGuire, where you realize McGuire didn't respect him. He wasn't going to listen to him. He didn't care. And his answer was, "You're going to find out about me. I'm going to find out about you." Well, that's when the Barnabas character decided to take a little turn now. And hey, wait a minute, and we will see more, and we will see more of that. But it's just the beginning, starting there. That's my take on it.
And what about yourself, Vicky? What's your final thoughts?
Took up all the good points. I have to agree with all of you on just about every avenue and every factoid that you guys just spit out. And it is for actually the first time when I didn't really think about it until you guys said something, that they interwove two stories and that they were trying to pull them both off, even though one is like slightly lagging and it's killing us for a couple more weeks after the fact. I was kind of sad how they abruptly ended that, though. The build up. It's sort of like planning for a wedding. You're planning for a wedding, and it just, how it starts.
I guess it's like Christmas. You spend all those weeks wrapping your presents and then you unwrap them. Like, okay, that it?
Yeah, I was expecting something more more mushroom cloud off into the distance kind of thing. But I think they kind of got in a hurry and ahead of themselves, and they were just ready to jump to another storyline. And I think they kind of let that one drop just a little too abruptly. But it's what it is. Soap operas are like that. They jump story to story. But I mean, as far as you guys are talking about, Catherine Lee Scott and Willie, probably the pinnacle of the segments because of how they played off each other. Yeah. And like you guys said, the range. Willie is so heartfelt and Josette / Maggie is just so, devoid of hope and, just looking for, it's like, please somebody find me, please somebody help me. And way they played off each other, I mean, I'm surprised more people didn't pick up off that. I'm sure they will. I wouldn't have until I watched this again, because if you go back, and like I always say every time we do this, these old episodes are probably the best things. All the good stuff happens. I understand the time hops and the color and everything else. We're all excited about that.
That's later.
But it's later. I understand that. But these episodes, like the set up all these stories, are so valid and important to the thousands of more that come after this. And it's just
Agreed.
Like, this person shows up over here when they were here before. I mean, it all starts making sense in a convoluted kind of way.
And it really does have to be seen from the beginning.
But I would, I noticed they start selling episodes from 208, I believe. That's the Barnabas episodes. And you got all this good stuff that happened prior to his arrival and up into his arrival into the early beginnings of Barnabas. So it really does make a lot of sense after you watch it. And the actors, I said, like Willie and Josette / Maggie, excellent interaction.
Also,
really heartfelt.
Also to neglect the fact that, those people who are Barnabas fans and they believe the Dark Shadows began with 210, they are totally neglecting the Laura storyline. They are totally neglecting Matthew Morgan. Thayer David is Matthew Morgan.
And we do see Laura again someday.
Yes, we will. That's later. But what I'm saying is that those people who, and this is my opinion, and I don't care if I get let me get the mail on that. I will say that those people who feel that the pre-Barnabas episodes are not Dark Shadows are missing out. They are missed opportunity, in my humble opinion.
Exactly.
I mean, my final thoughts of these episodes is that I think this they actually took a storyline that was boring me previously with the whole Jason McGuire and Elizabeth's daughter, and they actually made it interesting, which I liked how they were able to do that. Right. So I found that made this I was actually invested and interested in that. And as we said before, I quite like the weaving back and forth between these two storylines and the way that played out. I did like, I think there was a lot of really good acting, and I have to say that for the most part, all the everything's very well balanced between these two, to the point where one's not really overshadowing another one. They're both able to stand on their both merits, and I have to my hats off for here. A lot of really good strong moments. We did get some really good, nice, soft, tender moments in the middle of all the carnage that's going on between the two storylines, and I thought they were quite good. And the only thing I do kind of regret that I kind of wish that we had a Carolyn storyline when Elizabeth was taken away to hospital. And I kind of wish that they kind of kept Carolyn on that momentum. And and I think that it would have been nice that if she was going to get back at her mom for the marriage and on this kind of thing, it would have been quite nice if they could have kept her on this maturity momentum and had her do it a slightly different way. I find for me, it's kind of like we're just throwing her back to what she was like when the beginning of the series.
Yeah.
It would be nicer to have her on this trajectory where she's maturing, so she could have done this in a more mature kind of way and made it more interesting.
Especially because I agree.
But then we wouldn't have got buzz. So but we got buzz out of it. So now that we got buzz, thank God.
We got buzz. That's right.
We got buzz. But Keith, you're right. I mean, here she was while the mother was in the hospital, and she had to take over for the family, and she was really maturing. And she was telling Roger off, that kind of thing. And Roger, it just showed you what unfortunately how ineffectual he was, I mean, although he had an ego the size of Mount Rushmore, he really was.
Roger, they emasculated him episodes ago.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm afraid so.
Yeah, I had to sit there and say I have to sit there and say if I were going to make a outside of my least favorite character, this block, I had to sit there and say that it seems weird that with such a major storyline with Elizabeth and Carolyn and Buzz and McGuire, that you're kind of wondering where is Roger? Because you're sure that Roger would have a quip or two to say more,
at least
than what
the
you see.
very least.
It's almost like Jason's in the house, so I'm just going to avoid him at all costs, and I'm not going to any of the rooms that we're seeing. So I just had that kind of feel to it. Where is he at work? Is he? Where is he? So
a fan came out with a comment, by the way, which I thought was quite precipient, that the soap operas of that day, women watched the soap operas, housewives watched the soap operas. So the housewives like to see a kind of arrangement where the women made decisions. Oh. And if you think of Dark Shadows, and if you think of that, that's exactly what's happening in Dark Shadows. Liz makes the decisions.
Tad bit liberating, to say the least.
Yeah, yes. Carolyn makes the decisions when she has to come up to the plate, and it's the men that are secondary, and that's because of the soap opera audience. So I think that's a very valid point.
Well, I guess it's also quite telling from there's this Greek. A friend of mine, Greek mother, she said that the women are the men may be the head of the household, but the women are the neck, and they can turn the head any way they want to.
Same thing in Orthodox Jewish families. The women are the women run the house, and the men are intellectual, and they go to synagogue and they do their work, but the women run the house. And
they can turn the head any way they want to.
That's right.
The power's in the neck. The power's not in the head.
When you're able to do something like that, it wouldn't hurt. What can I tell you?
Well, this brings us to the end of our Dark Shadows 244 to 265. Our next Dark Shadows episode will be 266 to 286. Next month we will be doing So Is Death the End month, where we'll be covering Trilogy of Terror. We'll be covering 4 short stories by Edgar Allan Poe. We'll also be doing the 2-for-1, which is Hereditary and Midsummer. Unfortunately, Ari Aster was going to be with us, but due to the lock-in, he will not be with us. But we will have an interview with him that will come probably in the next few months or so. But he said he promised to do an interview. So unfortunately, he won't be in there to do Hereditary and Midsummer, but we do have a special guest, which we will announce later. And our European horror will be Eyes Without a Face, the classic French film, and of course Dark Shadows 266 to 286, where we learn more about Maggie in the sanatorium, more Julia Hoffman, and more Barnabas. And that brings us to the end. Of course, you can always follow us on our social media, which is at Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, Pinterest, and Instagram. And of course, you've been listening to us on some of your favorite social platforming, Podbean, SoundCloud, YouTube, etc., etc. Of course, if you're listening to us, you're listening to us from your favorite platform, but of course we're available on different platforms. We do have some surprises coming for you at May at the moment. Make sure you sign up to our newsletter at www.llpodcast.com and sign up for our newsletter. And of course, we do have one more competition for this month. So if you have any pictures of your pets, send a picture of your pets and you could win a hoodie. And if you want to know who's won a hoodie, you would have known if you signed up to our newsletter. And you would have seen everyone's lovely little pets, which sometimes were a lot better looking than we anticipated. They're actually better looking than us guest hosts. So yeah, yay for pets. So I guess we'll see you next week with Edgar Allan Poe's Trilogy of Terror with some of our favorites, Vincent Price, Basil Rathbone, and Peter Lorre. So it's good night for myself and good night, Tom.
Good night, everybody. Stay safe, and it's been a pleasure.
And good night, Vicki.
Good night, everybody. Y'all take care of each other.
Keep well and keep safe.
This has been a Literary License Podcast production. If you cry for help, there's no help for you.